Chapter 1293. Zhang Feng had wanted to say this for a long time. After all, Lao Li looked like he was in his 30s, but Li Chengqian was already in his 20s. What did this mean? It meant that Lao Li had married young. For such a child to not be led astray at home, especially in a wealthy family, it was already a blessing from the ancestors. At this moment, Li Chengqian's thoughts had gone astray, and he wanted to show off his awesomeness to gain recognition. There was nothing wrong with this, as it was something that everyone had experienced before. However, for it to happen to Lao Li, who was in charge of the assets of a wealthy family and had close ties with the upper echelons of the royal family, it was not right. After all, if he accidentally gave this brat a chance and this brat made a big mess out of it, he would die. Furthermore, Li Chengqian's personality was extremely prone to going to extremes. He was capable of doing such a thing. If Zhang Feng knew that Li Chengqian's identity was Li Chengqian, he would not be so shocked. After all, in history, Li Chengqian, who was supposed to win, plotted a rebellion with Duke Qin, Ho Junji, because of his impatience. However, Zhang Feng did not know. Thus, Zhang Feng could only make a judgment based on his observations. If this kid was not strictly controlled, he, Zhang Feng, would not have an easy time either. Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin, who was still somewhat reluctant, and shook his head. You are the one who spoiled him. Li Shimin glared. Tell me, which Lao Tzu doesn't love their own son? Even old Niu, old Yu, and old Qin, although they look carefree, they are never careless when it comes to protecting their own. You don't know, but once, when Tai Niu caused trouble at Swallow Descent restaurant, this old fellow led a large group of people and directly crippled that fellow. Zhang Feng nodded. You are right, but didn't you hear what Tai Niu said? Because of this, he was bedridden for half a year? Li Shimin truly did not know about this. However, he didn't want to continue arguing about this matter. Li Shimin could only sigh. Forget it. Qian has been spoiled rotten by old Chen and the others since he was young. It's time to give him a beating. Zhang Feng had a different opinion and said, no, it's best to use a sweet date plus a big stick. Scolding is not the best way. Often, encouragement is the best way to motivate a person. Li Shimin was speechless. I say, Feng Zi, one moment you say you want to beat him, and the next moment you say you want to encourage him. You've made me confused. Tell me properly. Zhang Feng laughed and said, actually, that's not the case. When you praise him, just point out his shortcomings. After all, you still need him to inherit your business. As for what you want to do, that's your business. What I can do is to wake him up this time. As for what happens after, I'm too lazy to care. He's your brother. You don't care. Don't you feel embarrassed? Zhang Feng rolled his eyes and said, but he's your son. You don't care and want me to care. Are you crazy? Li Shimin felt a little stifled in his heart. However, he couldn't win against Zhang Feng. He could only sigh and let it go. Feng Zi, let's not talk about this. I came this time to ask you about the phosphate fertilizer. What's going on? Also, why did I hear that you're doing something with old Gao? You even know about this? Zhang Feng was a little surprised. However, he still nodded and said, wasn't it a sacrifice yesterday? It's all because of your son. I originally remembered that I was going to participate in the sacrifice and see the face of our emperor. However, I forgot about the last experiment. They didn't even remind me. Don't you think that's infuriating? The most infuriating thing is that your son actually went instead of me. However, it's still okay. Fortunately, no one blamed him. Li Shimin glanced at Zhang Feng. He secretly said, isn't it because you were too sleepy and forgot? Don't think that I don't know. He had planned all of this on purpose. He had taken advantage of Zhang Feng's habit of sleeping too much, so he had secretly manipulated things behind the scenes. However, what Li Shimin couldn't understand was that this kid, yesterday, he heard that this kid came up with something amazing on the mountain. This couldn't help but arouse Li Shimin's great interest. Feng Zi, yesterday, I heard that you scolded all the scholars and Confucians? What's the meaning of this? Zhang Feng's eyelids twitched. Why is it that good things don't go out, but bad things spread so quickly? Zhang Feng hurriedly quibbled, no. Yesterday, I only expressed my own opinion. I didn't scold the world. This matter couldn't be admitted. Once he admitted it, he would really be dead. This would directly offend all the literati in the world. Even if he, Zhang Feng, had 100 heads, it wouldn't be enough to chop off. Therefore, no matter what, Zhang Feng wouldn't admit it even if he died. He didn't know which blabbermouth it was that had spread the news. Seeing this, Li Shimin found it funny and said, "You also have times when you're afraid of trouble? This isn't being afraid of trouble, okay? This isn't a big deal, okay? Damn it, where did you hear this from?" Chapter 1294. Li Shimin didn't know that Zhang Feng would be so excited. After joking with Zhang Feng for a while to vent the hatred in his heart, he said with a smile, "That's enough. This matter hasn't been spread, and Mr. Bo Shi and the others have ordered us to keep it a secret. Besides, this matter isn't that big. Do you think everyone has a problem? Staring at your little problem all day long and not letting go?" Zhang Feng didn't think so. After all, they still didn't know who was stirring up trouble behind the scenes. If this thing jumped out this time, although Zhang Feng was not afraid, he would be annoyed. Seeing this, Li Shimin didn't say anything. "Fengzi, what did you do in the field yesterday?" When they went up the mountain yesterday, the leader of the Imperial Guards on the mountain reported to Li Shimin. But as for what Zhang Feng did in the field, Li Shimin really didn't know. He only knew that Zhang Feng seemed to have made something extraordinary. This made Li Shimin a little excited. What did autumn planting mean? Li Shimin knew better than anyone else. Most importantly, once this thing was really implemented, would the Tang dynasty be short of food? And the most important thing was the phosphate fertilizer. But what Li Shimin wanted to know most was what Zhang Feng said in the hatchery yesterday. Why did it make more than 3,000 students so excited to work in the field? It must be known that although most of these students came from the lowest class of the common people, they had a lot of physical labor from a young age and worked in the fields every day. Naturally, they couldn't be more familiar with these things. However, this labor and the transformation of the student identity made everyone feel that only studying could solve their fate. Even a grand event like the autumn planting ceremony was just for show. However, why was Zhang Feng able to make these people behave in such a manner? Was it because he took off his boots? Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng and then looked at Li Chengqian, who was still in a daze in the room. He sighed and said, "Fengzi, tell me. Did you really make everyone willing to work in the field yesterday because you took off your boots once?" Zhang Feng was a little amused. "Can taking off my boots make them willing to work in the field? If I took off my clothes, wouldn't they go eat poop if I asked them to?" Li Shimin's expression froze. Zhang Feng said, "It's not like that. The most important thing is hope. Everyone has hope, and there's only one reason why these people came to the academy, and that's to make a name for themselves. Before the imperial examination, no one can guarantee that they can pass the imperial examination, and no one can guarantee that they can be an official or an official. But the academy has divided many paths for them to choose from, such as medicine, business, and the most attractive one, the Ministry of Works. This is where they want to go the most. Compared to passing the imperial examination, the imperial examination system of the Tang dynasty was actually flawed. Basically, the current imperial examination system mostly used the recommendation system. In fact, it was recommended by the big clans or the ministers in the imperial court. If a commoner really wanted to stand out, the exorbitant fees were enough to make people flinch. That was the real reason why everyone stopped. But Zhang Feng opened a back door for them. This was a back door of hope, but the most important thing should be that Zhang Feng did something amazing yesterday. But why was this guy's mouth still like the stone in the toilet? This made Li Shimin very troubled. "Fengzi, we are old brothers. I believe that you have your own plans and ideas, but I believe that you know better than me what this grain means." So, as brothers, Zhang Feng hurriedly interrupted Li Shimin. He knew that this old guy was trying to trick him again. In order to prevent this old guy from setting a trap for him, Zhang Feng said directly, "Okay, after all, this thing is not a big deal. But let me warn you first. This thing, before the experiment is successful, if you spread it, then we can't be brothers anymore." When Li Shimin heard that, he revealed an expression that said, At least you know what's good for you. Then he slowly said, actually, this matter is not a big deal. What are you doing? This is a good thing that will benefit you for a long time. Do you still need to hide this kind of thing? Am I right? Li Shimin guided him patiently again. Zhang Feng was also stunned when he heard this. He had no idea that Li Shimin was setting a trap for him again. When he came back to his senses, he saw that Li Shimin gave Zhang Feng a cigarette and sighed. Lao Li was also hot-blooded once. I once fantasized that the people of the Great Tang would be able to eat their fill and wear warm clothes, that their doors would not be closed at night, that every household would be filled with joy and joy. But alas, this old Li's head is empty. I have the hot-blooded desire to serve, but I can't. Sigh. Li Shimin did not forget to sigh heavily. Zhang Feng carefully looked at Li Shimin's face. Seeing that Li Shimin was really worried and did not seem to be acting, he said, Lao Li, I can understand how you feel. The Tang dynasty has just been established. Everything is waiting to be done. I also want to... Seeing this, Li Shimin put his arm around Zhang Feng's neck and said, then what can you do? Let's do it together? Chapter 1295. Zhang Feng realized that Li Shimin was setting a trap for him. But it was too late. But this was not important. What was important was that this old guy, although he didn't look like a good person, he had a big heart. Zhang Feng didn't intend to hide it and said, actually, I was experimenting with something yesterday. What is it? Li Shimin heard this and immediately asked excitedly, is it better than phosphorus fertilizer? Zhang Feng didn't know what to say. He nodded and shook his head. How should I say it? Actually, this thing is indeed very important, and very important. Zhang Feng pointed to the flower seeds in the flower pot in front of him and said, Lao Li, look at this seed. Li Shimin curiously stared at the flower seeds that Zhang Feng pulled out. Zhang Feng continued, look at these seeds. Zhang Feng spread out his hands and put some of the most plump seeds aside. Then he found some of the more shriveled seeds and said, what's the difference between them? Li Shimin touched his beard and said, aren't these all seeds? What's the difference? It's just that some are plump and some are shriveled. But they are all seeds. Zhang Feng nodded. You're right. But have you ever thought that if we cultivate these things, have you ever thought about the law of survival of the fittest? Li Shimin really didn't understand. Zhang Feng continued, take your neighbor for example. You old Li were born rich. Your children have enough food all day long and don't have to worry about food and clothing. Your neighbor, on the other hand, is thinking about what to eat next every day, while his children are hungry and full. What do you think is the difference between these two children in the future? This, Li Shimin couldn't help but stare blankly. He really didn't know what the difference was. If there was a difference, it would be the children of these two families. The children of the rich families would definitely go higher and higher, while the children of the poor families would still struggle in poverty. But Zhang Feng shook his head and said, if these two families encountered a famine or bandits at the same time, who do you think will survive? Li Shimin said without thinking, the rich people? Then look at these seeds. If they are all planted in a pot, the round seeds will definitely grow into a strong seedling. As for the shriveled seeds, no matter how many are planted, they will definitely be damaged in the wind and rain. At this moment, Li Shimin suddenly understood something. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that what Zhang Feng said was very reasonable. He asked excitedly, did you say this to those students? No, I just said it to Mr. Bosher and the others. By the way, Tai Nyo and the others were also there, as well as Hao Chujun and the others. Li Shimin almost wanted to kill someone. What was this? This was the national policy. Although what Zhang Feng said was indeed about the seeds, if this thing was exaggerated, wouldn't it be like the current Tang dynasty? Surrounded by foreign enemies, coupled with the control of several major forces in the country, Li Shimin already felt deep pressure. Coupled with the disaster of the people, all of a sudden, the Tang dynasty was walking on thin ice. Li Shimin couldn't help but sigh and recite a poem. When the house leaks, the wind blows, and it rains. When will the dawn come? Zhang Feng wanted to laugh. Oh, why are you reciting a poem? However, you're right. This thing, if small, is actually the banker. But if big, what's the difference between the current situation of the Tang dynasty and this dry seed? Well, let's not talk about this first. I have a good thing here. As long as this thing appears, the Tang dynasty will only need to wait for half a year to become strong. When Li Shimin heard this, he was instantly full of energy. He stared at Zhang Feng with a pair of burning eyes and asked, "Are you serious?" What was this? For Li Shimin, this was simply something that he had been dreaming about even in his dreams. It was something that he didn't even dare to dream about. At this time, Li Shimin was so excited that his hand, which was holding Zhang Feng's arm, was trembling. Most of the seeds in Zhang Feng's hand fell to the ground. Zhang Feng grimaced in pain. "Lao Li, my arm is not made of iron. If you pinch it again, it will be crippled." When Li Shimin heard this, he hurriedly came to his senses and let go of Zhang Feng's arm. Zhang Feng rubbed his arm and said, "I understand your feelings, but I have a condition. You have to promise me first." "Say it," Li Shimin said without even thinking about it. Zhang Feng's face became serious and said seriously, "Once this thing is made and revealed to the world, we may have to face the anger of all the big clans in the Tang dynasty who rely on food to make a fortune. Do you still dare to do it?" Chapter 1296. This time, Li Shimin wanted to answer immediately. Who asked him to be the son of heaven? Who dared to disobey the son of heaven? But when he thought of the 5 families and 7 major clans, as well as that Guannong, the Shandong aristocrats, and the large clans with thousands of acres of land, as well as that pair of mysterious big hands behind everything, Li Shimin hesitated. This matter was indeed a big deal, but it was also not a big deal. However, the key problem was that. What the hell was that? I say, Feng Zi, can you tell me what you're talking about? Zhang Feng did not intend to hide it and said without hesitation, "It's the selection of seeds. Yesterday, I put wheat seeds which weighed about 100 caddies of seeds. Do you know how many good seeds I screened out? How would Li Shimin know?" He spread out his hands and said, "Tell me. How would I know these things?" Zhang Feng touched his nose and said, "Out of 100 caddies of seeds, I only screened out 30 caddies of seeds that were full of seeds." This time, Li Shimin understood everything. No wonder Zhang Feng used the flower seed as an example. It turned out that he was talking about this. But out of 100 caddies of seeds, only 30 caddies were left. Wasn't this a bit too much? What about the remaining 70 caddies? How much food would be wasted? Zhang Feng saw Li Shimin's face flickering with an uncertain expression and motioned for Li Shimin to follow. Then, the two of them silently went to the farm, which was now the agricultural product hatchery. At the entrance of the hatchery, there were already 5 burly men guarding it. The chickens, ducks, and pigs in the garden had long disappeared without a trace. On the gate, there was a prominent wooden sign with vermilion words written on it, "Hatchery Restricted Area, unauthorized persons are not allowed to enter." In the garden, Old Gao sat on a stool and did not go anywhere. He sat in front of the field where Zhang Feng had farmed before. The dust in his hand that was used to drive away chickens and ducks had now become a sharp weapon to drive away birds. As long as a small bird dared to come, it would be difficult to escape from Old Gao's dust. Zhang Feng also admired Old Gao's gaze. He looked to be in his 70s or 80s, but his eyes were sharper than the average person's. The area where Zhang Feng was yesterday had been surrounded by a brand new bamboo fence. In order to make it easier to distinguish, Old Gao had even erected a signboard in this area. Write a letter saying, "The headmaster is farming, idle people are not allowed to step in. Those who violate this order will be expelled from the mountain." What a guy! Seeing this scene, Li Shimin was shocked. "Feng Zi, what did you plant in the soil?" The commotion here also alarmed Elder Gao and the guards. When they saw Zhang Feng arrive, they hurriedly wanted to kneel, but they couldn't do anything about Zhang Feng's rules. They could only give Zhang Feng a standard military salute. Compared to Elder Gao, it was different. Naturally, he knew Li Shimin. But when he suddenly saw the emperor arrive, he instinctively wanted to kneel. But when he thought about it, his posture was very ugly. Zhang Feng also looked at Old Gao curiously and said, "Old Gao, what kind of posture is this?" What could Old Gao say? He could only stand up and cup his fists to Li Shimin without any care. This old one has nothing to do recently, so I studied a set of tricks. Zhang Feng was a bit confused. But now wasn't the time to talk about this. He pointed to the courtyard and said, "Today, I called Lao Li to come and see our masterpiece yesterday. You can go and do whatever you need to do." After old Gao left, Zhang Feng opened a gate in the fence and brought Li Shimin into the wheat field. But once they entered the wheat field, Li Shimin smelled a strange smell. He asked curiously, "Did you use phosphate fertilizer in this wheat field?" "Smart." Zhang Feng nodded and said, "I did use this stuff. I saw old Feng before. You don't know, but we went to the farmland outside Chang'an city. Guess, why are the farmers planted in this field? Are they all Guangzhong thin harvest?" Guangzhong thin harvest? Li Shimin really didn't know about this. This kind of planting method had been used for hundreds of years, at least thousands of years, and there had never been a problem. But in Zhang Feng's field, how did it become like this? Zhang Feng nodded and said, "Look at the soil." Zhang Feng pointed to the soil under his feet and said, "The soil here is fine because no one has planted farmers before, and there is not much fertilizer used. It is just the feces of pigs, cows, and sheep, and there is not much ash from burning the leaves of trees. That's why there aren't many acidic substances in the soil. Think about it. If I make you drink vinegar all day long, and I don't stop drinking vinegar, I add it to your food, your dishes, and your wine, will you feel comfortable?" That's right. In this case, isn't it the same? What's so uncomfortable about it? Seeing Li Shimin's appearance, Zhang Feng patted his forehead and said, "I made a wrong analogy. Let me do it again. Think about it. If I feed you all day long, do you think you can be strong?" This time Li Shimin understood, but he still asked, "But this is the way passed down by the ancestors." That's easy to solve. Go to your family's accountant and ask about the annual harvest of the same mu of land for the past 10 years. Remove the ones with the best harvest and the ones with the worst harvest. You can calculate the difference. Chapter 1297. Was there a need to calculate this? There was no need to do this at all. Until now, the imperial plantation had been piled up like a mountain on his desk, as well as the summary of production from the Ministry of Works. Every day, he would read it at least 10 times. How could he not know? However, at this moment, when Zhang Feng said this, he hurriedly did the calculations. He really found a problem. That was, the production of all the fields was decreasing year by year. Although it wasn't a lot, when it was tallied up, it really gave Li Shimin a big fright. How did this thing become like this? Could it be that vinegar grew in the soil? This question left Zhang Feng dumbfounded. He did not know what to say next. This way of understanding was really strange. Zhang Feng thought about it for a long time before he came back to his senses and said, "No, I say, old Li, your way of thinking is really awesome. However, the acidity I was talking about is not this acidity. If I say too much, you won't understand. Go back and ask old Feng, then ask your son and the others, and they will understand. Now, let's talk about the problem of the land. Basically, the rich families will apply a lot of fertilizer to their fields every year. Ordinary people who have livestock will also apply fertilizer to their fields. But what about those who don't have these things? What will they do? They can only add fire to the fields and treat it as fertilizer. However, in the long run, the fields will slowly produce some things that are not good for the farmers. These things will seriously reduce the yield. As for the phosphate fertilizer I mentioned, its greatest benefit is to reduce the acidity and alkalinity of the soil, allowing the farmers to better absorb the nutrients in the soil. Also, look at this thing." As Zhang Feng spoke, he threw away the wheat seeds that had just been planted in the soil. The wheat seeds were still wrapped in a layer of bran and plant ash, making the originally small wheat seeds look as big as a fingernail. Li Shimin could not help but ask curiously, "You are talking about wheat seeds?" Zhang Feng didn't say anything. Instead, he motioned for Li Shimin to peel off the thing. When Li Shimin peeled off the bran and the ashes, he was shocked. There really were wheat seeds inside. "Didn't you just say that the ash will increase the acidity of the soil? Why did you get this thing again?" Zhang Feng was speechless. He pointed at the phosphate fertilizer that had not been completely diluted and said, "But I have this." Also, the seeds are wrapped in plant ash. On the one hand, they can kill the eggs and let them escape the sharp teeth of the insects and birds. This is a form of protection, understand? Forget it, you won't understand even if I tell you more. After all, you haven't properly farmed before. When you have time, come and chat with old Gao more. I think he knows more than you. Alright, there's also that Ma Zhou. That kid is a talent and is competent in this aspect. Hey! Ma Zhou? Li Shimin couldn't help but silently remember this name. After Zhang Feng thoroughly explained the pros and cons of wheat seeds to Li Shimin, he finally couldn't stand the smell anymore. He hurriedly returned to the villa. Zhang Feng seriously doubted how old Gao could tolerate the smell. When he returned to the villa, Jing Shu came back with a big basket of wild mushrooms. When Zhang Feng saw the matsutake mushrooms in the basket, he couldn't help but feel hungry. He excitedly hugged Jing Shu and kissed her. Ah, Lao Li, you really came at the right time. Look at our virtuous wife. She went out to play for a while and got us such high-quality ingredients. Li Shimin, Jing Shu, all right. Today, we are in a good mood. I will go and cook some dishes. You guys wait, I will be back soon. All right, Shiva, quickly get someone to go down the mountain and get me a piece of tenderloin. I want it fresh. Li Shimin was still immersed in the vast and beautiful scenery that Zhang Feng had described. At this time, he could already imagine the scene half a year later even without Zhang Feng's reminder. The more he thought about it, the more Li Shimin felt that this thing was worth promoting. In this way, in half a year's time, would the Tang dynasty still be lacking in food? Food was the foundation of everyone's foothold. Once there was no food, the first to be unable to bear it were the people. Once the citizens were uneasy, what Zhang Feng had said earlier about how water could carry a boat, but it could also capsize it. Moreover, Zhang Feng had also said that there would be a locust plague next year that would be even more serious than this year's. The significance of the autumn planting this time was extraordinary. Not only was it life-saving food, but it was also the key to stabilizing the country. When he thought of this, Li Shimin looked at Li Qingqian, who was standing in the living room. He couldn't help but feel angry. With a gloomy face, he slapped Li Qingqian's face and said coldly, "Are you awake now? Li Qingqian, if you are awake, then grind for me." Jing Shu was shocked when she heard the word me. She subconsciously turned to look at the kitchen. Seeing that Zhang Feng was still busy in the kitchen, she breathed a sigh of relief. She thought that the Emperor and Prince Zhang had already laid their cards on the table, but now it seemed that the Emperor still didn't want to. However, Jing Shu's interest was piqued. After all, there were not many opportunities to see the Emperor's calligraphy up close. Chapter 1298. Li Qingqian had really woken up. He was not woken up by Li Shimin's beating. He was woken up by Zhang Feng's words. In the past 2 hours, he had thought of many things, especially when he was with Cheng Chumo and the others, and the flattery of the palace maids and eunuchs, and the reprimands of the High Dukes, especially High Duke Chen's reprimand of the church, as well as the Crown Prince's junior tutor Li Gang. He recalled all the things he had seen and heard in the academy. In fact, Chen Guogong was right. Other than his identity as the Crown Prince, Li Qingqian was nothing. Now, the reason why so many people surrounded him was because he was the Crown Prince. On the other hand, judging from the High Dukes, most of them were doing it for the sake of his father. Only when he was with Cheng Chumo and the others, could he feel a trace of his own. But, since he had known Zhang Feng, his ambition had been completely exposed. Although Zhang Feng had not said anything, he had been slowly correcting his mistakes. But what about him? At this moment, looking at Zhang Feng in the kitchen, Li Qingqian smiled knowingly. "Thank you, brother." Li Shimin's handwriting was very beautiful. It was very majestic. Li Shimin also felt the change in Li Qingqian. He looked Li Qingqian up and down and nodded. "Not bad, it seems that you have really understood." "Thank you, father, for your teachings." Li Shimin waved his hand and said, "Forget it, you just need to know your duty." "Oh right, that calligraphy over there was given to you by Fengzi. I hope that you have to spend 2 hours every day to observe it and reflect on yourself. This is my order." Li Qingqian heard this and was shocked. He hurriedly tidied up his clothes and picked up the calligraphy that Zhang Feng had put on the table. The calligraphy was very ugly. It did not have the free and easy handwriting of Li Shimin at all. But it also had a different flavor. There were only 4 words. It was rare for him to be confused. But at this time, Li Chengqian held it in his bosom like a treasure. And at this time, Li Shimin changed to a new piece of paper, and in his mood, he wrote down the words, "Water can carry a boat, but it can also overturn it." He looked at the words. Li Shimin couldn't help but stroke his beard and laugh. Glancing at Jing Shu, Li Shimin beckoned, "Miss Jing Shu." Jing Shu hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. "My daughter is here." Li Shimin naturally knew that this clever girl already knew his identity, so he was very satisfied with Jing Shu. "Feng Zi, that silly boy, hasn't decided yet. When will he get married?" Jing Shu blushed. Seeing this, Li Shimin sighed and said, "His dog eyes are blind. Later, I will ask for an imperial edict to let the emperor grant you a marriage, okay?" "What imperial edict? Isn't this something you can do with 1 sentence?" Jing Shu was shocked and hurriedly said, "Second master, you don't have to worry about this." Young master said that 3 years later, when he passes the imperial examination, there will be 3 consecutive good things. "Oh? This boy has such a big tone. What do you mean by 3 consecutive good things?" Li Shimin was in a good mood and simply chatted with Jing Shu. Li Chengqian, on the other hand, was very interested in the calligraphy. For a moment, he was in a daze while looking at the words Li Shimin had just written. From time to time, there was a trace of excitement in his eyes. Jing Shu saw that Li Chengqian was not paying attention and said in a low voice, "Young master said that in the imperial examination 3 years later, he will have to pass at least 9 imperial examinations. This is the first good thing. The second good thing is that he will also pass the imperial examinations. This is the second good thing. The third good thing is naturally." While speaking, Jing Shu's face turned red. How could this escape Li Shimin's eyes? He instantly laughed. "Not bad, not bad. With that boy's ability, this matter can really be done." At this moment, Zhang Feng's voice sounded from the kitchen door. "The food is here. Come and help." Hearing this, Jing Shu hurriedly left. In the academy, maids and servants were not allowed to exist in the villa. Every day, there would be people from Tonghui Fong who would come to clean and clear the rubbish. However, in return, no matter who you were, you had to pay a cleaning fee. This was the rule set by Zhang Feng. Even if Mr. Bo Shi and the others were furious, it was useless. In the end, they could only choose a few clever students from the crowd to be little pages. Only then did they give up. Therefore, in this villa, Jing Shu and Zhang Feng had to cook whatever they wanted to eat. There were not many dishes. Most of them were braised dishes. In addition, there were a few plates of stir-fried mushrooms, especially the plate of matsutake mushrooms, which made everyone salivate. As there was no chili, Zhang Feng could only replace the chili with dogwood. Therefore, at this time, it smelled different. However, in the eyes of Li Shimin and the others, this was a table of delicacies that they had never eaten in the palace. After the food and wine were served, Zhang Feng put food into Jing Shu's bowl and called out to her, "Come, come, come, don't just look. I've been hungry for a long time. But let me say this first, after we finish eating, we'll talk about other things. How about that?" Li Shimin originally wanted to give Zhang Feng a few glasses of wine to make him faint. However, Zhang Feng refused to let Jing Shu leave the table no matter what. At this time, he directly said that this made Li Shimin's little plan die in the womb. He could not help but feel a little annoyed. It seems that this boy already knew. Chapter 1299. Although everyone had their own thoughts during the meal, it was the most unforgettable meal Li Shimin had ever had. That fresh and fragrant smell made Li Shimin want Xiao Gizi to send people to the mountains to look for this mushroom so that he could slowly taste it when he returned. After the meal, in the end, Jing Shu retreated. The 3 men sat in the living room and looked at Shiwa. No one knew what they were thinking. Shiwa felt his hair stand on end. After pouring tea for everyone, he hurriedly stayed. Even if Li Shimin asked him to stay, he did not dare to stay. The pressure was too great. Although he really wanted to hear it, but after Shiwa left, Zhang Feng smiled mysteriously and said, Lao Li, do you want to be famous? Li Shimin? What do you mean? Zhang Feng pointed at the door and said, It's the method of selecting wheat seeds and the new planting method. Li Shimin heard this and could not figure it out even if he racked his brains. Could this thing make a fortune? How can this thing make a fortune? You don't understand, do you? As long as we spread that phosphate fertilizer and the new planting method of wheat, not only will we make a fortune, but all the people of the Tang dynasty will also benefit. Isn't that good? Li Shimin was even more confused. Wasn't this what he wanted to persuade him? Originally, Li Shimin thought that after the meal, he would persuade Zhang Feng to spread these things to the people of the Tang dynasty. However, he was also worried. This guy was too suspicious. If he did not have a foolproof plan, he would never agree. But now, why did this guy suddenly agree? Seeing Li Shimin's expression, Zhang Feng knew that he did not understand. He sighed and said, Actually, I thought that this thing must not be spread before this year, but I forgot about the locust plague next year. So when I was cooking just now, I was thinking that this thing is not safe to speak of. When I finish this thing today, I estimate that in less than a day the news will spread, just like when I took off my boots yesterday. The most important thing is that we can't guess what the emperor is thinking. And what we can think of, the emperor has already thought of many times before, hasn't he? So instead of this, why don't we be one step ahead of the emperor and get as many as we can? When the time comes, even if the emperor knows, he can't do anything, right? Li Shimin was speechless. Did he think that he was a scourge? Was that necessary? However, this also made Li Shimin more cautious. He was too anxious. To be precise, he was too poor at the moment, so he couldn't think of a compromise. Zhang Feng did not care. After all, it was his business to think the same as the emperor. As for the rest, he would talk about it when the time came. Li Shimin thought about it and said, There were a few times when I told Zhang Sun Darren. You don't know, but His Majesty is especially concerned about your affairs. The main reason is because of the Mitsubishi assassin. Hearing this, Zhang Feng was stunned. What do you mean? The emperor knows about the Mitsubishi assassination? Li Shimin nodded. What do you think? We are all under the emperor's nose. How can we hide the things that the emperor wants to know? Zhang Feng sighed. Damn, it's true. The higher the rank, the more powerful the emperor is. Let's not talk about it. I didn't want to hide this thing in the first place. It's fine as long as we don't let the people of the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs and Guanlong people know about it. As for the rest, I think the emperor will help us hide it, right? Li Shimin was a little speechless. Think about it. The emperor has been wanting to get rid of them for a long time. Moreover, this kind of magic weapon is the magic weapon of the border area. Do you think the emperor will tell outsiders? I believe that as long as the emperor knows, it will be the safest because the emperor will eliminate those spies who are watching us as soon as possible. What's wrong with that? Zhang Feng was also interested. He had not talked about Qiuzi for a long time. He asked, Lao Li, how is the matter in Qiuzi? Li Shimin heard this and couldn't help but have a headache. You still want to talk about this? Didn't you ask them to delay it? Until now, the 3 generals in the army can't wait to go up the mountain and tie you up and take you to Qiuzi City. If it weren't for the emperor, do you think you can stay here so peacefully? Zhang Feng was dumbfounded. He asked, What do you mean? Chen Yaojin, Yu Qigong, and Yo Jinda all know? Of course. And it's not just them. General Li Jing and General Qin Qiong all know. You have to know that the thing you made is harder than any weapon in the army now. They said that although this thing doesn't look good and is a little small, it's simply unparalleled in breaking defense. Therefore, the main reason why Lord Zhang Sun came to me yesterday was to pass on a message to you. Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin suspiciously and asked, What is it? His Majesty has given you a secret order, telling you to do all you can to deal with those things you mentioned. Qiuzi can only hold out for a month at most, because the great Tang spies have already ascertained that Xieli and Tuli have already gathered all the Turkic elites. Chapter 1300. It was a bolt from the blue. Good heavens! Are they trying to take advantage of the Tang dynasty? Zhang Feng knew the current situation of the Turks. After the snow and ice disaster, the locust plague, and the civil strife, a large number of war horses in the Turks were secretly brought to the Tang dynasty by the small tribes to exchange for food. At this time, winter was about to arrive. To be more precise, in the Turkic lands around Lake Baikal, wasn't it already snowing? Zhang Feng, who was familiar with the map, realized the seriousness of the problem at this time. At this time, the Turks were basically running out of ammunition and food. If they pushed him too far, he could really do anything. 1 month? Did this mean that they would be able to finish gathering in a month's time? At that time, the 100,000 soldiers of Chiotzi? Could they hold on with the current weapons? When these 100,000 soldiers retreated or were defeated and surrounded, the west gate of the Tang dynasty would have no protection at all. Zhang Feng couldn't help but feel a sense of crisis. What does Lord Zhangsun mean? We haven't found the iron yet. I can't do anything about it. Li Shimin waved his hand and said, Lord Zhangsun said that this time His Majesty is going to dismantle the iron boat, and His Majesty has begun to negotiate with the people of the Wang clan. Aren't the people of Mount Longsho looking for iron now? His Majesty asked me to ask you, are you sure there is an iron mine in that place? If there is, His Majesty has prepared an imperial edict to give that land to. At this point, Zhang Feng couldn't help but open his eyes wide. Mount Longsho. That place was a good place. Mount Longsho originally belonged to the royal hunting ground. In addition, the imperial manor of the Tang dynasty was there. If that place was given to him, it would be perfect. Li Shimin was also struggling with this matter. After hesitating for a long time and seeing the fervent look in Zhang Feng's eyes, he gritted his teeth and said, His Majesty is preparing to send an army to guard Mount Longsho and expel anyone other than our people. When Zhang Feng heard this, he instantly became like a deflated balloon, dispirited and listless. You should have said so earlier. Holy shit. I thought you were going to reward me. Didn't the emperor like to reward people with land? This was simply tsai. This was fate. Zhang Feng let out a long sigh. Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng, who was moaning and groaning. He shook his head in amusement and said, What? You still want the emperor to bestow this place to you? Now that you mention it, His Majesty really does have this intention. However, the prerequisite is that you have to produce all those weapons and solve the Chiotzi siege. Otherwise, you see, everything is nonsense. If that's the case, it's simple. Zhang Feng smiled confidently and said, This matter is very simple. As long as there are mines, and as long as a large number of blacksmiths join us in half a month, I will be able to produce 10,000 strong crossbows, 100 fake ballistae, Zhuge divine crossbows, composite bows, and so on in half a month. But as for the firearms, don't think about it for the time being. Those things need time. Once the crisis in Chiotzi City is resolved, and if Chen Tiniu and the others can really complete the experiment I mentioned, I will be able to free myself to produce the firearms. Li Shimin couldn't help but say, Is there no way to bring it forward? This is the best time to destroy the Turks in one fell swoop. Zhang Feng glanced at Li Shimin and looked at Li Shimin up and down in amazement. He said, Lao Li, why do I suspect that you are even more reckless than old Niu and the others? Li Shimin's expression froze. He asked, What do you mean? Zhang Feng was speechless. Do you want to go to war that much? I thought you were quite refined, but I didn't expect you to be such a restless person deep down in your bones. What are the benefits of going to war? What do we fight for in war? What if we lose in war? Answer these 3 questions of mine first. If you can answer them, I will personally make you a full steel armor. How about it? Li Shimin was stumped by the questions, but this was not the time to talk about this. However, Li Shimin wanted to wear it. If it was something that Zhang Feng could say, how could it be bad? But Li Shimin also suddenly had a kind of alarm. Previously, in the imperial court, people had been scolding him, saying that he was a reckless person. He had been dissatisfied, but now that Zhang Feng had said the same thing, Li Shimin could not help but pay attention to this problem. He asked, Feng Zi, you said that I am restless? How can you tell? Zhang Feng rolled his eyes. Is there a need to see? Look at you chatting with me. What are you talking about? When we talk about war, you are so excited. Isn't it obvious? Li Shimin only noticed that something was wrong with him. However, he still asked, "Then tell me, what do you need to go to war? The 3 factors you mentioned, what are they?" Li Shimin was really confused by Zhang Feng. These questions were usually not a problem for him. However, the problem was that he had too many things on his mind at this moment. How could he think so much? Zhang Feng smiled and patted Li Shimin's head. "That's it. You don't even know this. What are you talking about?" Chapter 1301. Li Shimin's face darkened. He slapped away Zhang Feng's devil claw and asked speechlessly, "Why don't you tell me?" "I know, but you're afraid that you'll feel wrong if I tell you, right?" Hearing that, Zhang Feng took a sip of tea happily and said unhurriedly, "Actually, these things are easy to understand. Think about it first. One of the essential factors of war is the provision of fodder before the troops and horses are mobilized, and fodder is a necessity. Look at the Tang dynasty now, how many torments can it withstand? Moreover, the second thing is the military pay, weapons, and equipment. The third thing is to consider the logistical support of supplies and horses. You don't know any of these things, so why are you so passionate?" Li Shimin heard that. He was so angry that his nose was crooked. "Damn you. If I say so, you'll probably say that I'm wrong. My goodness, it's all right in your mouth? Can't we have a good and pleasant chat?" Seeing that Li Shimin was about to lose his temper, Zhang Feng hurriedly said, "That's enough. You want to go to war? You'd better be a businessman. As for weapons, as long as there are iron, Zhang Feng will do what I say. But I advise you to tell Lord Zhangsun that you'd better forget about the counterattack." Li Shimin couldn't help but be stunned when he heard that. "But at this time, once your weapons join in, we'll definitely be able to defeat this group of useless things. When the army's morale is slack, it'll be the best time for our army to pursue and attack. At this time, Xieli and Tuli's men are joining forces. Once they finish, we can form a large-scale joint attack camp. If we miss this opportunity, we won't have another chance." Zhang Feng seriously suspected that this guy was a war maniac or a hardcore military fan. If he chased after him at this time, he wouldn't even know how he died. First of all, you don't have enough food to rely on. In a long-distance raid, you definitely won't be able to carry those heavy weapons. Second, are you familiar with the terrain of the grassland? Once the Turks scatter and flee, who will you chase? Li Shimin was stunned. He thought for a moment and said, "If they dare to divide their forces, then I will divide my forces too. With divine weapons in my hands, why should I be afraid of them?" Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin as if he was looking at an idiot and said, "I said that there is something wrong with your head. If His Majesty thinks the same as you, then we should quickly pack up and run. We will definitely lose this battle." Li Shimin was frightened by Zhang Feng's words. He hurriedly asked, "What do you mean?" "What do I mean?" Zhang Feng smiled faintly and said, "First of all, the Turks are not familiar with the terrain. This is a problem for the Turks, but for our army, there is no advantage at all. As far as I know, the Turks are good at guerrilla warfare, but the tactics that the soldiers of the Tang dynasty are familiar with are not suitable for fighting in the grassland. So, once we divide our forces, we will definitely lose. Second, if our soldiers are wiped out in small groups, our weapons will become the enemy's weapons. Coupled with their natural geographical advantage, do you think they will win?" This, Li Shimin couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. He really didn't expect this to be the outcome. Li Shimin dreamed of wiping out the Turks to prevent future troubles. However, he didn't know that there were several excellent opportunities in his eyes, but in Zhang Feng's eyes, there was no chance of winning at all. Could it be that after leading soldiers for so many years, my talent in military is worthless in Zhang Feng's eyes? Li Shimin began to doubt his life. He seriously suspected that Zhang Feng did it on purpose. But now that he thought about it carefully, Zhang Feng's words were indeed reasonable. He was too impulsive. If he really did that, the Tang dynasty would definitely be in a disadvantageous position. Not to mention losing the weapons that he had obtained with great difficulty, it would definitely be more difficult to fight then. Li Shimin couldn't help but ask with some disappointment. Then, according to what you said, there is no chance? There is. Zhang Feng nodded. There will definitely be a chance, but not now. Li Shimin's eyes lit up when he heard this. He said, Fengzi, you know that the emperor has been brooding over the shame of the Wei River. If you can really help the emperor solve this crisis, it is possible for you to be on the same level as the emperor. Really? Zhang Feng was stunned. But when he looked at Li Shimin, he was instantly discouraged. You speak as if you are on the same level as the emperor. I almost believed you. Come on, if you are the emperor, then I will find a way for you now. But you don't have the final say. Li Shimin saw that there was hope, so he hurriedly said, Fengzi, think about it. Do you still remember the matter of the Wei River Alliance? Zhang Feng nodded. I remember, but... Li Shimin waved his hand and said, Isn't that enough? Since you know it, you should also know that this matter has always been a hurdle in His Majesty's heart. Once you can really do it, His Majesty will not let it go. If you can really help the Emperor solve this troublesome matter, then tell me, what will the Emperor do? You think that being on the same level as the Emperor is unreliable, but the Emperor will definitely summon you in advance and reward you with an official position. Zhang Feng sighed and hurriedly stopped Li Shimin. Brother, you are too much. Chapter 1302. Zhang Feng was indeed tempted. Zhang Feng had been thinking about this matter since he had nothing to do before. No one would be at ease if this matter happened to him. But now was not the time to send troops. Thinking that he could meet the Emperor in advance, and this matter was so big, plus he had done so many things before, the Emperor should agree to let him become a third-grade official, right? At this moment, Li Chengqian had unknowingly sat down beside Zhang Feng. He used his elbow to nudge Zhang Feng and said, Feng, Zi, I also know about this matter. Last night, I also saw Lord Zhangsun. He asked you about it. I feel that the Emperor seems to be very anxious. If you really have a way, do you want to? Okay. Zhang Feng also had to spend a lot of effort talking. The most important thing was, he was sleepy. Zhang Feng thought for a while and said, Actually, it's not that there is no way. As long as the autumn planting is perfectly resolved, then once we have a bumper harvest next year, let alone the Turks, even if His Majesty wants to fight, he'll be able to fight all the way to the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean Sea? Where is that? Li Chengqian and Li Shimin were stunned. This was the first time they had heard of this new place. Zhang Feng's mouth opened wide and he was so excited that he blurted it out. At this moment, he hurriedly said, That place is actually Dashi. You know Dashi, right? As long as you take Dashi, you will be able to see that place. They knew about Dashi, but even if they did not count the nights, it would still take them a year to get there. Moreover, this did not include the snow and rain. Only then would they be able to reach Dashi. Such a long journey. Zhang Feng continued, Like I said before, the yield of grain now is only a few dawn per mu. But once the seeds are selected and the method I mentioned is used, as well as the fertilizer, it won't be a problem for the yield to reach 10 dawn per mu. Are you serious? Li Shimin suddenly stood up and stared at Zhang Feng. 10 dawn. He didn't even dare to think about it. In other words, the yield per mu could reach 1,000 caddies? Oh my God, even a storyteller wouldn't dare to say that. Although Zhang Feng had always said so, they had always treated it as a joke. However, since today, Li Shimin saw the grains that Zhang Feng planted in the soil, he couldn't stay calm anymore. In addition, Li Chengqian was the one who personally participated in the experiment to extract the phosphate fertilizer. No one knew the power of this thing better than him. At this time, Zhang Feng said this again, which was why the two of them were so excited. Zhang Feng seemed to be a little speechless. He looked at the two of them and gestured for them to sit down. Don't be so surprised, okay? That's enough to scare you. If I tell you that I have a better variety of crops than this wheat, will you die on the spot? Li Shimin's eyes were red. Food was the foundation of a foothold. With food, what couldn't he do? At this time, Zhang Feng said, Lao Li, do you remember how I used Tubo and Jinla to deal with the Turks? This is a strategy, and what sustains the strategy is food. Now that the Tang dynasty is short of food, This relationship is almost on the verge of collapse. But have you thought about it? Once next year, every family will have a bumper harvest, and no one in the Tang dynasty will be short of food. Instead, we will worry about the problem of food sales. What do you think about the Turks and Tubo? Zhang Feng smiled coldly and said, "At that time, we will buy a wave of food and wine. When Tubo is completely squeezed dry, only the Turks will be left. I think in half a year next year, when the warhorses and even lambs of the Turks are all gone, do you think the Turks will still be a match for the Tang dynasty? Without warhorses, what's the difference between the Turks and those damn cows and lambs?" Li Shimin listened to Zhang Feng's description and couldn't help but tremble with excitement. Yes, 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 why didn't I think of it? We've talked about this before. Yes. Zhang Feng patted Li Shimin's shoulder and said again, "Think about it again. What else can we do with our food?" Li Shimin was thinking about how to destroy the Turks at this time. As for what Zhang Feng said at this time, he really didn't have time to think about it. He waved his hand and said, "Fengzi, tell me." Zhang Feng looked at Li Shimin speechlessly and shook his head. In fact, this matter is very easy to understand. Think about it, why did I choose Qiuzi as the target of this besieging way to save Zhao? And His Majesty will think so too? Li Shimin really couldn't think of this. So at this time, he was too lazy to think about it. He gestured to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng smiled and said, "Because Qiuzi City is an important trade center that connects the Tang dynasty to the western regions. Once the position of Qiuzi City is stabilized, if we can eliminate the people of the 5 surnames and 7 clans and other forces in Guanlong, then this trade lifeline will fall into our hands. Do you feel good?" Chapter 1303. Li Shimin was really scared out of his wits. When Zhang Feng said this, Li Shimin finally reacted. "You mean we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone by choosing Qiuzi?" Zhang Feng nodded. "You finally realized it." "That's right. For the time being, only the goods of the Tang dynasty can be transported out of the Tang dynasty on the water route. However, if foreign merchants want to come to the Tang dynasty, they will still take the land route. As for the water route, you have seen their ships. They can't compare with the ships of the Tang dynasty at all. Therefore, the land route is their first choice. What would they choose in the past? They would choose to sell some precious goods nearby. Qiuzi City is basically where nearly half of the important trade of the Tang dynasty gathers. This time, as long as we act fast enough, even if they realize what we are doing, what can they do? Do you think they'll eat us? We are helping the soldiers of the Tang dynasty eliminate the spies in the city. As long as we capture Qiuzi, our food will not only be sold to the surrounding small countries, but we can also take it to places farther away, such as Persia and Arabia. Think about it carefully. When the time comes, what will the emperor think when he sees Chang'an city 10 times more lively than it is now? When the emperor's treasury is full, what will he think? Don't worry. Don't worry. We're doing this for the sake of His Majesty. Besides, didn't you just say that this is His Majesty's sore spot? As long as we help the emperor get rid of his sore point, will the emperor care about the reactions of the 5 families and 7 clans? When the time comes, I'm afraid that the people of the 5 families and 7 clans won't be able to sit still and will come to talk to us. Looking at the smile on Zhang Feng's face, Li Shimin could not help but tremble. He suddenly had the illusion that he was being targeted by a fox. Isn't Zhang Feng that fox? What the F***ck? However, Li Shimin was still somewhat worried. He asked, "What you said is very good, but the Turks, Indians, and Tubo people aren't fools. If we really take Qiuzi, won't we be attacked from both sides?" Zhang Feng pointed to his head and said, "As long as the soldiers guarding the city don't have pig brains, the city won't be lost. Moreover, it will become the strongest fortress other than the imperial city. Because we have an endless supply of ballistae. There was also the indestructible crossbow and crossbow bolts. As long as he had these things, let him come. The more that come, the more that die." This time, Li Shimin no longer doubted Zhang Feng's words. In fact, they could not wait any longer. "Then let's do it now." Zhang Feng was confused. Isn't it just the matter of getting the seeds and phosphorus fertilizer? Zhang Feng spread his hands. The seeds are too simple. I'm too lazy to do it. If you want to do it, ask Tai Niu and the others. It's a foolproof operation. It's simple and worry-free. Li Shimin seriously suspected that Zhang Feng was scolding him, but he had no evidence. However, this matter was too big, and he didn't dare to make a decision on the spot. He rubbed his swollen head. At this moment, Zhang Feng yawned and said, Okay, it's getting late. I have to go to sleep. This is 2F** King troublesome. You guys are really too much. Don't you think it's too big of a deal? Li Shimin also had the intention to leave. However, when he heard Zhang Feng's words and looked outside, he mistakenly thought that it was already dark. However, when he saw that the sun was still above his head, he thought that this kid was going to sleep? Could it be that he was going to Jingshu? At this thought, Li Shimin laughed and revealed a knowing look. Then I won't disturb your mood. I'll get someone to send you a cart of velvet next time. However, as someone who has been through this before, I still have to remind you that you have to restrain yourself. Zhang Feng? Velvet? Restrain? I'll restrain your second uncle. Watching Li Shimin laugh as he left, Zhang Feng waved his fist fiercely. He was really sleepy. Too many things had happened recently. Besides, Zhang Feng had always had the habit of taking afternoon naps. Once it was time, he would be extremely sleepy. As soon as Li Shimin left Zhang Feng's villa, the smile on his face instantly disappeared. He waved his hand and said, Follow me down the mountain quickly. Li Qingqian also knew that this matter was very serious. Without hesitation, he hurriedly called Little Gizi and the others and hurried down the mountain. After all, this matter was too serious. They had to make plans first. Most importantly, Li Shimin still wanted to ask Fang Xianling. This old man, why didn't he report such a big matter to him? It was time to give him a warning. Little Gizi and the others didn't know what was going on with the emperor, but they could guess from afar that the emperor was in a good mood today. When he left the room, he was smiling. However, why did his expression become so serious when he left the room? Could it be that something big had really happened? Just as Little Gizi's imagination was running wild, Li Shimin's dignified voice faintly sounded from the sedan. Pass down the order, go to Duke Liang's residence. Chapter 1304. Marquis Liang's mansion was not far from Zhang Feng's mansion. However, for special reasons, not only Fang Xianling, but even Wei Jing, who lived next door to Zhang Feng, did not dare to live here casually. He had not even returned to the mansion for a long time. However, when Zhang Feng was not there, they would come back from the Furong Garden, which was originally used for cooling and handling government affairs. As for the Hibiscus Garden, only the emperor, the retired emperor, and the princes and dukes had the qualifications to enter and stay for a short period of time during the hot summer months. And this qualification was just a word from the emperor. However, because of Zhang Feng, basically, the Hibiscus Garden had already become the daily residence of the various Grand Dukes. Fortunately, the Hibiscus Garden was sufficiently large, and it was even not inferior to the Great Bright Palace. At this time, Marquis Liang's mansion was very lively. About 10 carriages and sedans were parked at the door. The security at the entrance was also stricter than usual. In the living room of the mansion, smoke and dust had long been lingering. Qing Yaojin and the others were sitting here neatly with their limbs spread out, smoking. Wei Zheng was walking around in the living room with his hands behind his back, sighing from time to time. Cheng Yaojin could not help but feel impatient. He stared at Wei Zheng and said, Old man Wei, can you be quiet? Even the emperor doesn't know about it. And even if the emperor knows about it, according to that guy's nature, this thing will definitely work. What are you afraid of? Wei Zheng glared at Chen Yaojin angrily. Seeing that the blanket at his feet was smoking, he stepped forward angrily and stamped out the cigarette butt. He said fiercely, Yes, you are not in a hurry. Have you thought about it? The autumn planting will be over in less than a month. Even if this guy has the ability to screw the heavens, can he make all the people in the Tang dynasty use this phosphate fertilizer? Besides, that guy is just talking nonsense. Have you seen the real effect of the phosphate fertilizer? What if that thing didn't work? What if they ended up with no harvest? Have you not seen old bull's condition before? That thing can kill people. What if? Xing Yaojin waved his hand and glared at Wei Zheng. What if what? Look at your son, isn't he poisoned as well? But what happened next? A few jars of vinegar and nothing will happen. Take a look at old Fong. That old fellow has personally gone down to the ground to eat dirt. Ask him to tell you if this thing is useful or not. That piece of land is equivalent to a huge jar of vinegar. Tell me, if this thing were to go down, let's not talk about whether it would be useful or not. Just this sour thing of his would make it so that nothing would happen to the Zhuang family, right? Fang Xuanling's expression was ugly. He didn't expect the two of them to quarrel and drag him into it. Most importantly, you said that old man eats dirt? What did that mean? You're cursing me, aren't you? The more he thought about it, the more awkward he felt. Fang Xianling stood up speechlessly and said, "Oh, stop quarreling. Old He is right about this. Last time when I went to see Fengzi, he really compared the soil to the Zhuang family. Your family has hundreds or even thousands of mu of fertile land. If you don't believe me, you can eat dirt in the field. Once you eat it, you'll know." Li Shimin was very generous. However, because the national treasury was empty, it was difficult to reward these dukes every time he wanted to. The official rank would be full, but the reward from the national treasury was not much. What should he do? In the end, the emperor and the empress discussed in bed and immediately thought of an excellent solution. What did they lack the most? And it was a large piece of land. Because of the years of war, the Tang dynasty was simply vast but sparsely populated. Therefore, Li Shimin waved his hand. He directly and generously rewarded them with land. In order to show the emperor's kindness, he rewarded them with hundreds of mu of land. If they only received a few mu of land or dozens of mu of land, they would be too stingy. Li Shimin felt that he could not afford to lose face like that. As a result, although all the ministers now were looking forward to a promotion day and night, they could not do anything about it. The land in their family kept skyrocketing, but their official rank did not change at all. His mother couldn't help but feel distressed. It was a good thing to have more land, but it was not entirely a good thing. The tax had to be taken into account. Every year, the tax had to be paid as much as possible. Otherwise, the emperor would be unhappy. Therefore, the emperor was more diligent in giving out land. Anyway, he had a lot of land. Moreover, the land was uncultivated. If he gave it to these people, not only could it generate income for them, but more importantly, the tax burden of his national treasury would gradually be replenished. It was simply a continuous money-making machine. But in this way, all the ministers were worried when they heard that the emperor was going to reward them. How was that a reward? It was simply increasing their burden, okay? This thing. Who did not have hundreds of mu of land. Sometimes, they did not even know how much land they had. They only knew that every year, the granaries of their families did not increase by much. That was not a big deal. The most important thing was, the saddest thing was, the emperor was still rewarding them with land. It was really Tesco. Chapter 1305. I'm happy to see you. The emperor waved his hand and rewarded you with 100 mu of fertile land full of thatch. You're pleasing to the eye. Reward. You've done a good job. Reward. Ever since Fang Xianling came up with this signing rewards and punishment list, the ministers' days of hardship had really come. As long as the ministers showed up on time every month, from the Minister of Internal Affairs to the small county magistrate of Chang'an city, they would all receive one word: reward. Although the national treasury was now abundant. Don't expect the emperor to reward you with money. That's just a dream. The emperor waved his hand. Reward. 500 mu of fertile land. This was the most painful thing for them. What was this? This wasn't a reward, this was a punishment. Especially this year, when the locust plague arrived, it was simply a disaster for them. But what could they do? They had to accept the reward from the emperor even if they had tears in their eyes. Otherwise, they would be defying the emperor's edict. If the group of civil officials saw this, they would talk about it again. That wouldn't be worth it. Who knew the pain in their hearts? But now it was okay. After the worship ceremony yesterday, Fang Xianling found a few people and whispered about it. Everyone couldn't help but be angry. This was equivalent to finding a way for them to survive. Therefore, when they got off work today, they came together to ask Fang Xianling if this matter was true. If it was true, then they would really be rich this year. But the most important problem at this time was that Niu Jinda's precedent was there. What if the food grown from this thing was poisonous? After all, this thing had never existed before. At this time, everyone's face was full of hesitation. Du Ruhui knew Fang Xianling better. He touched his finger that was a little yellow from the smoke and said, "Master Fang, why don't we wait for Ui to come back and ask her properly?" "There's no need to ask. Last night, Ui already told me what happened on the mountain yesterday." Fang Xianling smiled faintly. His eyes quickly scanned the group of people. Only then did he leisurely smoke his cigarette, stroke his beard, and stop talking. But at this time, Qing Yaojin and Zhang Sun Wuji stood up almost at the same time and asked in unison, "What are they doing on the mountain?" Fang Xuanling's expression froze. He asked, "Why didn't your family come back last night?" But I said they went down the mountain together. Hearing this, Zhang Sun Wuji looked at Qing Yaojin in confusion and asked, "Old He, your virgin didn't go back?" Everyone instantly realized something and looked at each other. Instantly, they were so angry that their beards were about to explode. Damn it. This group of little bastards, for such an important matter, they actually dared to stay out all night last night for this daddy. Needless to say, at this time, Wei Zheng and the others didn't know. What did that mean? It meant that these little bastards didn't come back last night. However, everyone suddenly looked at Du Ruhui. Du Ruhui sighed and said, "Don't look at me. That little bastard of mine didn't come back either." At this time, everyone felt very balanced. They scolded Chung Chumo and the others for a while, but no one said anything harsh. After everyone sat down, Zhang Sun Wuji said, "Master Fang, I think it's better for you to talk about this matter. Your son is still the best." Seeing this, Fang Xianling laughed and said with emotion, "It's not that my son is good, it's that my son is honest to begin with." Everyone rolled their eyes in unison. It was considered that they agreed with Fang Xianling. Fang Xianling coughed and said without blushing or panting, "Actually, the matter is simple. Yesterday, didn't the emperor deliberately let Zhang Feng not attend the ceremony? In the end, this kid finally realized it and went up the mountain. In the end, guess what happened? How could everyone have the leisure to guess? They impatiently urged, 'Hurry up and say it. Why are you dawdling? If you have the time, you would have explained it long ago. Hurry up, don't dawdle. If you dawdle, I'll pull out your beard.'" As Chen Yaojin clenched his fists, Fang Xianling hurriedly wiped his beard and said, "This kid took off his boots and went to work." Took off his boots? Zhang Feng took off his boots? This was a little bit like Zhang Feng. If it was someone else, they would really think about the issue of identity. However, this set of theories was just a decoration for Zhang Feng. This kid had always been a master who did not play by the rules. The most important thing was, what was the fuss about taking off his boots? Who would not take off their boots? But, if he were to do it in front of those old antiques, it would seem a little. Everyone also realized where the problem was. They curiously urged again. Fang Xianling said unhurriedly, "This kid not only took off his boots, but also scolded all the Confucians in the world, saying that all the Confucians in the world are just superficial guys. Most importantly, this kid said it in front of Mr. Bashi and more than 3,000 students in the academy." This, Wei Zheng and others could not help but be confused. At this time, they looked at each other and did not know what to say. In the end, they just gave a thumbs up and said, "Awesome." Chapter 1306. Fang Xianling said unhurriedly, "That's not all. The most important thing is that this guy not only did that, but also did a great thing. If old man is right, once this thing is done, your burden will become your biggest treasure bowl." This time, Zhang Sun Wuji and others were all shocked. What was their biggest burden? No need to think. No need to say. They all understood. At least this was what they were talking about now. The most important thing was that they were basically the biggest landlords in the Tang dynasty. It was nothing in normal days. However, in a disaster year like this, This had become their biggest problem. If this kid could really solve this problem, then he would definitely be able to do it. What was that? That was something that would benefit the future. Everyone in the imperial court was grimacing over this matter. Everyone was worried and looking forward to the autumn planting, but at this critical juncture, Zhang Feng had announced that he could use a wondrous method to resolve the imperial court's greatest problem and turn the Great Tang's greatest problem into its greatest advantage. How could they not be excited? At this time, Zhang Feng was simply everyone's great benefactor. Looking at everyone's expressions, Feng Xianling took a sip of tea, smacked his lips, and happily lit another cigarette. At this time, his mood was better than anyone else's. Since that day when he went to the field with Zhang Feng, Feng Xianling seemed to be 10 years younger. All of this was attributed to Zhang Feng's words. He could make the Zhuang family, who originally could produce 5 or 6 dawn per mu, more than double in an instant. What was this? This was not only Feng Xuanling's savior, but also the meritorious minister of the entire Tang dynasty. Feng Xuanling's salary was not much, plus the expenses of the whole family. Without the support of the profits from the salt, braised meat, and other industries last time, Feng Xianling did not dare to imagine the current situation. What was this? This was all thanks to Zhang Feng. If it were not for Zhang Feng, he did not dare to imagine what kind of life he would have at this time. Eating meat and drinking wine every meal? It was good enough to be full. And the most important thing was, once this phosphate fertilizer that could increase the yield of crops was really successful, or it could really have an effect, look, what kind of horrible scene was that? At this time, when Feng Xianling thought of the prosperous scene that Zhang Feng told him, it could still make his blood boil. Everyone would no longer lack of food and no longer be afraid of food. This was something he dared not to dream. As the head of the secretariat, the number of memorials he received every day was simply uncountable. But what did these memorials talk about? They all wanted food. They wanted food. But how much surplus food in the national treasury? He knew it better than anyone. To put it bluntly, the amount of grain stored in the national treasury was not even as much as what he had in his residence. How horrible was this? In addition, it was the autumn planting season. It was also the time for the officials to open the warehouse and release the seeds. But at this time, what could the emperor give? These were all things. But as the head of the secretariat, he looked forward to Zhang Feng's good news every day. But what did he receive in these few days? At this time, he was looking at Zhang Sun Wuji and the others. Feng Xianling laughed even more happily. He even laughed out loud. Zhang Sun Wuji saw this and said speechlessly, "I say, Master Feng, if you want to say something, just say it. Why are you looking at me and laughing?" When everyone saw that Feng Xianling was really laughing at this time, they could not help but want to beat him up. This old guy was not like this usually. Did he learn bad things from Zhang Feng? They could not help but have red eyes. Feng Xianling also felt that danger was approaching and hurriedly said, I'll say it, okay? I just thought of a funny thing. Look at how anxious you are. Old man, let me give you a heads up. Don't get too excited later. The old man only prepared one set of longevity materials. Old man, are you cursing us in a roundabout way? To think that I've always said that you're upright, but it turns out that you're such a bad person. Seeing that everyone was really angry, Feng Xianling was not afraid. Instead, he said lightly, I remember that your mansion seems to have more than 600 mu of farmland, but almost half of it is abandoned, right? If it were me, I would advise you to go back now and plow your idle fields. Wait for Feng Zi's news. Next year, the old man guarantees that you will have so much food that you will have to sleep on it. Cheng Yaojin's claws were 3 inches away from Feng Xuanling's beard, but after hearing this, he could not help but be stunned. He asked, What do you mean? Zhang Sun Wuji and the others were also stunned. Living on a pile of food? Was this a joke? When they dreamed, they did dream about it. But in reality, could it be? Feng Xianling smiled faintly and stared into Cheng Yaojin's eyes and said, Because Feng Zi improved the planting method yesterday. If you really do as he said, I guarantee that your food will really double, and this is just a conservative estimate. Chapter 1307. What? Was it true? Zhang Feng, that little bastard, was not one to brag. When it came to serious business, he never lied. What he said was a conservative estimate, but it was basically a done deal. If the phosphate fertilizer was true, how much wheat could be harvested from 1 mu of land? Gulp. Qing Yaojin swallowed hard and asked excitedly, "Is what you said true?" When has old man ever lied to others? If this old man's guess is correct, His Majesty should already know by now. Moreover, based on Feng Zi's character, do you think that Feng Zi won't bring His Majesty to see the wheat fields he planted? Hearing this, only then did everyone remember that after they finished their morning exercises, when they saw the emperor, they found that the emperor seemed to have something on his mind. Moreover, he seemed to have a lot on his mind. After he hurriedly finished his morning court session, he hurriedly left the court session. And who were these people? Everyone had been out with His Majesty. How could they not know that His Majesty was going to see Feng Zi? If that was the case, wouldn't this matter be set in stone? Thinking that His Majesty would know about it, they became even more anxious. The first thing that came to their mind was whether the emperor would take back their land. After all, they had told the emperor many times that it was difficult to grow crops in a roundabout way. Thinking of this, they became even more anxious. Even Wei Zheng was a little anxious. He hurriedly asked, "Master Feng, tell us, what is this new method?" Feng Xianling was very comfortable at this time. Looking at everyone's anxious eyes, he said with a smile, "Don't worry, don't worry, my ass. Believe it or not, if you continue to waste time with Lao Tzu will punch you. Do you think you can stand it?" Yu Qigong couldn't sit still. He was the same as Qing Yaojin. Not only did he have to support his family, but he also had to support the entire military camp. He also had to help those veterans who were disabled because of their injuries. Originally, they didn't need to worry about this matter. Every year, the imperial court would distribute large amounts of food and money, but this year was different. This year, not to mention them, even the military camp did not have enough food. Where would they find the spare money to feed these people? However, they were generals. What they saw was definitely not worth it. If these people were left alone, where would the morale of the army be? Would they still need to recruit soldiers in the future? These were all things that they needed to consider. How could the grain and money distributed by the imperial court be enough? Although Zhang Feng could stuff some of them in, that was the academy, not a shelter. If that guy was driven to a corner, he would be in trouble. Cheng Yaojin came to his senses at this time. He grabbed Feng Xuanling's collar and asked in a trembling voice, "Tell me, how could Feng Xianling withstand this?" His face instantly turned pale. When Du Ruhui saw this, he hurriedly slapped Cheng Yaojin's hand away and scolded, "Old He, you better know your place. Do you really want to take Master Feng's life?" Seeing this, Cheng Yaojin's face froze. He hurriedly let go and laughed. "Isn't this urgent? You also know that I have thousands of people to feed." That's what. Feng Xianling calmed down for a long time before he recovered. He waved his hand and said, forget it. Old man can understand how old He and the others feel. But this matter, I'm just talking about it here. Once you leave this door, you all know, right?" Everyone nodded. Wasn't this nonsense? Without the emperor's approval, even if you gave them 10 heads, they wouldn't dare to reveal this matter. That was not something as simple as losing their heads. Even more seriously, it might cause a riot among the people. Just as Feng Xianling was talking about the screening method that Zhang Feng mentioned, on the other side, in Niu Jinda's residence, 2 strong men, one big and one small, were lying in the courtyard. One of them was holding a jar of vinegar in his hand and kept burping. The other one had one of his legs wrapped tightly and was resting on a tree branch. His snores were deafening. And at this moment, a servant suddenly whispered in Niu Jinda's ear. Hearing this, Niu Jinda opened his eyes in an instant and slapped the servant in the face, causing the servant to spin in a circle on the spot. "You said that those old things went to Liang Guogong's residence?" That servant was originally Niu Jinda's bodyguard. Because he was injured, he stayed in Niu Jinda's residence. He had long been used to this. He laughed and covered his swollen cheek. "Master, this lowly servant dares to lie about this matter? This lowly servant saw it with my own eyes. Niu Jinda heard this and narrowed his eyes slightly. He asked, that old man Yuchi and old Hei, those two fools, didn't they leave behind any instructions? The personal guards of the two generals told this lowly one that they said that the Duke went to Duke Feng's estate because of something that could increase the harvest of grain. What? When Niu Jinda heard this, he instantly sat up. This angry shout scared Niu Jianhu so much that his whole body trembled. He also got up and subconsciously kicked the ground with his legs, but the next moment, the pain from his broken leg made him howl loudly. Niu Jinda was so angry that he slapped him on the head. Perhaps because of his broken leg, when Niu Jinda's palm landed on his head, it became a gentle caress. Lower your voice. After scolding Niu Jianhu, Niu Jinda looked at the servant again and asked, is what you said true? It's absolutely true. This lowly one personally inquired about it. Moreover, the guard of the Duke of Wei estate is from the same hometown as this lowly one. After drinking 3 cups of wine, this brat confessed everything. He said that after Master Feng secretly went to see young Master Zhang Feng last time, he was overjoyed. When he returned home, he immediately plowed the several hundred mu of land that had been abandoned for a long time. Chapter 1308. That was quite a rare sight. Feng Xianling had always regarded the land given by the emperor as a burden. Moreover, he had a lot of food at home, but the emperor would reward him with dozens or hundreds of mu of land every year. However, Feng Xianling had always planted as much as he could. But this time, what exactly happened? What made this old guy suddenly change his personality? Niu Jinda hugged the jar of vinegar and took a big gulp. He burped and said, continue. Seeing this, the servant became bolder. He stood up and said, and I heard that Master Feng took out all the savings in the family to buy land. What's more, Master Feng secretly went to the treasury to borrow money to buy land. This was a strange thing. This old man had always been an honest man and treated money like dirt. Something big must have happened for him to go and borrow money. Niu Jinda was not stupid. After a series of things, he could not help but think of an important person. That was Zhang Feng. Could it be that this was because of what Zhang Feng said? That made this old guy change his personality? Moreover, land was the biggest pain in the heart of every minister. But, when he thought of this, Niu Jinda waved his hand and said, quickly send people to investigate. Hearing this, the servant was ready to run. But Niu Jinda looked at the jar of vinegar in his hand and said, this jar of aged vinegar is for you. Drink it all before he goes. When he comes back, Lao Tzu will reward each of you with a jar of aged vinegar. In an instant, the servant was not calm. The smile on his face gradually froze. He held the vinegar in his arms and wanted to slap himself. When Niu Jinda burped, he dodged. Why did Lao Tzu dodge? This was great. A jar of vinegar. But seeing Niu Jinda looking at him, and even Niu Jianhu looking at him with a playful expression, he could only force a smile that was uglier than crying. Bracing himself, he tilted his head back and gulped down the wine. He didn't want to drink either. But if they made Master unhappy, it would be fatal. Instead of lying down for a whole day, he thought that it would be more practical to drink a jar of vinegar. After all, the old master had been drinking it for so many days, while the other person drank it every day. Why didn't anything happen to him? After seeing that the servant was done being jealous, Niu Jinda pouted and said, go to the accountant's office and withdraw 100 strings of money. If it's not enough, just withdraw more. But you have to do this well for me. If you mess it up, you know the consequences. When the servant heard this, it was as if he had been granted amnesty. He nodded repeatedly and slipped away. When the servant ran away, Niu Jianhu asked curiously, Father, what happened? Niu Jinda looked at Niu Jianhu's right leg on the ground and asked with some emotion, your leg is fine, right? Seeing that Niu Jinda didn't answer his question, Niu Jianhu quickly moved his right leg and said, although I can't do any big exercise for the time being, I can still walk a few steps. When Niu Jinda heard this, he nodded excitedly, this is all thanks to Feng Zi. Haven't you thought about how to repay Feng Zi? I have. Niu Jianhu's eyes instantly turned red and said, after I retire, I will never leave Feng Zi's side. I will only be loyal to Feng Zi for the rest of my life. But Niu Jinda gave Niu Jianhu a slap on the head and said, "Don't tell me you want to follow that bastard Feng Zi's surname? Repayment is guaranteed, but under the fate of our military family, there can only be one loyal minister. That is the emperor." This was their mission and also their destiny. Although they now had great power, there were many lessons learned from the mistakes of others. There were also many eyes watching them from behind. He was grateful to Zhang Feng for saving his life, and he would not hesitate to go through water and tread on fire. However, loyalty would only be shown to the emperor. Even if he wanted to say it, he could only say it in his heart. Niu Jianhu obviously hadn't thought so far ahead. After all, he was only 19 years old. However, Niu Jinda was somewhat gratified. After all, his son didn't disgrace him. He was a man who valued friendship and righteousness. Alright, there are some things that you can just say in your heart. At most, you still have to put it into action. Zhang Feng is so cunning that he won't take a fancy to you. However, your leg is fine now. Don't you want to go and thank Feng Zi? After hearing this, Niu Jianhu finally understood. He hurriedly picked up the bamboo stick on the ground and was about to go out. However, he was stopped by Niu Jinda and scolded, "You're going just like that? Where are you going?" Niu Jianhu was stunned. "Didn't you say that Feng Zi is on the mountain? Moreover, I'm so bored at home. I've long wanted to go back to the mountain." Niu Jinda heard this and sighed, "You silly boy, what gift do you think you're going to bring?" Niu Jianhu was in a dilemma. It was too vulgar to give money. Besides, would Feng Zi lack money? What should he give? Suddenly, Niu Jian and Hui turned their heads and stared straight at the statue of Guan Yu in the living room of their home. Their eyes shone brightly. Niu Jinda's eyelids twitched. However, in the end, Niu Jinda also sighed and smiled. "Forget it, this painting will be Feng Zi's. Let's go. Let's go to his residence to eat and drink." Chapter 1309. Niu Jinda looked reckless on the outside. Moreover, he appeared to be rash and reckless outside, but he was not like that. The real Niu Jinda was exceptionally shrewd and calculating. Otherwise, how could he become a general at the age of 35? Wasn't that nonsense? At this time, it was obvious that Fang Xianling and the other old men were on guard. If they went up the mountain now, they would definitely bump into the emperor. And most importantly, even if they went up the mountain, would Feng Zi tell him so honestly? Now, it was impossible to go to Fang Xuanling's mansion. Where else could it be? Of course, it was Zhang Feng's mansion. There were some things that Zhang Feng naturally would not tell others. For example, how many times did Zhang Feng, the bastard, say that there was no wine? But what happened later? This guy always made wine in the tavern. What did this mean? Everyone was the same. Good things should always be prepared at home. The more Niu Jinda thought about it, the more he felt it was possible. After all, Zhang Feng had a criminal record. Niu Jinda's mansion, although not in the residence of the 16th prince, was not far from it. And most importantly, Zhang Feng's mansion originally belonged to the retired emperor. All the traffic, safety, scenery, and so on were the best in the whole area. After coming out of Xinning Square, they turned a corner and went straight to Zhang Feng's mansion. At this time, Jia Daoren was gone at the gate of Zhang Feng's mansion, but the rest of the people were staring at everyone passing by the gate like knives. They seemed to be on guard against something. When Niu Jinda's sedan appeared in the vision of the servants, the soldiers who were patrolling all surrounded the gate of Zhang Feng's mansion. After all, they used to be soldiers, so they could see that Niu Jinda's sedan was coming for the mansion. When Niu Jinda's sedan landed, the housekeeper, Du Ziting, had already appeared at the gate. The moment he saw Niu Jinda, Du Ziting's eyelids twitched, and he grinned and laughed. "Old Master Niu is here? Sorry for not going out to meet you. Sorry for not coming out to meet you." Niu Jinda waved his hand and glanced at the servants who were trembling all over. He then cupped his fists and said, "It's fine. I wonder if Feng Zi is in the residence." Du Ziting naturally didn't notice the strange behavior of the servants behind her. She sighed and said, "Master Niu, please come inside. Come in and sit down. Let's talk." Niu Jinda laughed and said, Good, good, good. While speaking, he walked side by side with Du Ziding. However, after Du Ziding saw Niu Jianhu, her eyes couldn't help but pop out as she exclaimed, "Young noble Niu's legs are healed?" Niu Jinda glanced at Niu Jianhu, who was trembling on crutches, and said, "He hasn't recovered yet. He can only walk a few steps." However, this kid couldn't sit still and insisted on coming to see Feng Zi, wanting to thank Feng Zi in person. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to eat or sleep early. I had no choice but to bring him to pay Feng Zi a visit. It just so happens that I also wanted to thank Feng Zi. Ayaya. Master Niu, you've come at the wrong time. Niu Jinda pretended to be surprised and said, "What's wrong?" After Du Ziding welcomed Niu Jinda and his son into the yard, she said, "My master didn't come back at all yesterday. He went directly from Chang'an University to White Deer College. Even yesterday morning, second madam was picked up by someone sent by Mr. Bosher to the mountain." I see. Niu Jinda pretended to sigh. However, he was already overjoyed in his heart. Wasn't it better if they weren't here? However, he still had to put on a show. He slapped his thigh and said, let's go to the academy. Son, let's go." Niu Jianhu didn't cower. He glanced at Niu Jinda's face and suddenly said, "Father, my legs hurt again." "What?" Niu Jinda was shocked. He hurriedly squatted down to hold Niu Jianhu's legs and asked, Come on, carry the young master to the carriage." Du Ziding was also shocked. Old Niu and his son were the old master's brothers. If the old master heard about this, wouldn't he offend someone? At the thought of this, Du Ziding hurriedly said, "Master Niu, don't be impatient. Come on, quickly carry young Master Niu to the guest room in the mansion to rest." "Master Niu, don't be anxious." "How can I not be anxious? My son studied the books of the saints. He naturally has to learn to be grateful. At this time, he must go up the mountain personally to thank his teacher." When Niu Jinda heard this, he started to talk noisily. As he spoke, Du Ziding's forehead was covered in cold sweat. "Master Niu, this is also the old master's mansion. Moreover, you and the old master are brothers. Why don't you wait for the young master to rest for a while before going up the mountain? If the young master's legs are injured again, this old man can't bear the blame. Just take it as giving this old man some face. How about it?" Seeing this, Niu Jinda sighed and pretended to be struggling in his heart. He said, "All right then. Since you've said so, if I don't show you kindness, then I really can't come again." When Du Ziding heard this, she beamed and said, "Then, please take a seat in the living room, Master Niu. Come on, quickly prepare the best wine and dishes." Chapter 13:10. Niu Jinda was so happy. At the table, Zhang Tai told Du Ziding about how he looked for phosphate ores, what he heard from Feng Zi and Long Yudao, and what he heard about the war in the outer space. He even made Du Ziding, who was still in a daze, fall to the ground. This time, Niu Jinda looked at the butler who was snoring on the table and said, "Brother Du." "Old Du? Du Ziding?" Seeing that Du Ziding was really drunk, Niu Jinda then shouted, "Someone." The maid who had been waiting at the door hurried in. Seeing the butler like this, she was also flustered. Niu Jinda said, "Quickly carry your butler away. He's drunk." Oh. A few little maids hurriedly carried the butler out of the living room. In an instant, a few servants seemed to want to show off in front of the woman and hurried forward to help. In an instant, the entire front yard of the mansion was in a mess. Seeing this, Niu Jinda lit a cigarette and sat for a while before slowly getting up. But when he walked out of the door, he found that there was still a manservant guarding the door. After seeing Niu Jinda, the manservant bowed respectfully, "Master Niu." "Oh, I'm drunk. I'm going to sit in the garden. I've heard Feng Zi boast that his 4 courtyards each have their own merits. Why don't you show me around? By the way, I can sober up. I might have to bring your master back tonight." Hearing this, the manservant dared not say anything. He could only hurriedly lead Niu Jinda around the courtyard. How could Niu Jinda be in the mood to change the courtyard? When he was chatting with Du Ziding just now, he had basically figured out the situation of the courtyard thoroughly. And what surprised him the most was the east courtyard. After all, The 3 courtyards in the south, west, and north were all fine. Everyone could go in and out. But only the east courtyard. It was said that it was fine before, but since a month ago, Zhang Feng found 3 old guys from Tonghui Fong from outside, no one was allowed to enter the east courtyard, including the second madam, Jingshu. Only the 3 old men took turns to guard the courtyard. This piqued Niu Jinda's interest. "Brat, I've heard from your master that there are some rare flowers and plants in the east courtyard. Aren't you going to bring me to take a look? The things here are basically the same as the plants in my residence. It's boring to look at them. Quickly lead me there." The manservant was greatly alarmed when he heard this and hurriedly said, "Master Niu, you can't. Niu Jinda stared and asked, "What?" "Master once said that other than his orders, no one is allowed to enter Dingguan. So, Master Niu, it's better if you don't go. When old master returns, please let old master personally." "Bullshit." In an instant, Niu Jinda's ruffian style broke out. He stared at the waiter and said, "Yesterday, I was drinking with your master at Chang'an University. He also said that he wanted me to come here to admire his East Court today. Why is he not here? His words don't count, do they?" The manservant instantly broke out in a cold sweat. The relationship between Master Niu and the others was obvious to all. Moreover, at this time, the housekeeper was drunk and the woman was not here. They could not make the decision. Seeing this, Niu Jinda shouted again, "What? Do you really want me to go and invite Feng Zi here now? You come here. Quickly go up the mountain and ask Feng Zi to come down the mountain. Just say that I, old Niu, was bullied in his residence and I can't even look around the courtyard. What kind of logic is this? What do you mean?" The servant basically knew Niu Jinda. At this time, when he saw Niu Jinda angry, he was also frightened. He hurriedly went forward to persuade him and kept winking at the manservant. "Brat, isn't it just looking at the courtyard? It's not going to the master's main room. What are you afraid of? You can't even do such a small thing. If the master knows about it, have you thought about the consequences? Our master values brotherhood the most. If he knows about it, you brat, just wait to get out of here." Niu Jinda looked at them with a smile. At this time, he said, "By the way, Feng Zi said that he wants the Guan Yu painting in my house. That is the one and only authentic painting in the world. Back then, I was reluctant to sell it even if someone offered 10,000 gold. This time, Feng Zi cured my father and I, so I took it and prepared to give it to Feng Zi as a thank you gift. Alas. But you have disappointed me too much. Forget it, I'm leaving." Guan Yu painting? The manservant did not know, but the old soldiers and servants all knew. Back then, this thing was bestowed by the emperor. It was spread out from the palace of the previous dynasty. Even if it was not authentic, what was it? This was something bestowed by the emperor. Its significance was extraordinary. At this time, this blind thing. This was simply, Master was the most affectionate and righteous. This was known by everyone. Wasn't this Guan Yu painting a good match for Master? The servants hurriedly surrounded Niu Jinda and apologized. "Master Niu, you must calm down. This little thing has just come to the residence and he doesn't know many things. Isn't it just going to the east courtyard to take a look?" Go, I will go with you." Yes, go, we will all go with you. Whoever doesn't let you in, I will be the first to beat him." Surrounded by the servants, Niu Jinda breathed a sigh of relief. "Forget it, if I say too much, Feng Zi will think that I am a little narrow-minded. Let's go around. Father, wait for me, I want to go too." Chapter 13:11. Niu Jinda turned his head and saw Niu Jianhu running towards them with only one leg. Behind him, there were also a few young maidservants with red faces following closely behind him. Niu Jinda scolded them, "Don't run around if your leg is not good. What if you make Feng Zi worried?" "It's okay. I want to see Feng Zi's courtyard. Besides, Feng Zi is here. Even if it's broken, we can just reconnect it. Besides, we're in Feng Zi's mansion. Nothing will go wrong." The servants felt ashamed when they heard that. They hurriedly asked someone to find a bamboo pole and tied it to the leg of Zhang Feng's favorite recliner. They lifted Niu Jianhu up and went to the east courtyard. Seeing that, only then did the father and son smile knowingly. The east courtyard was not big. However, the arched door of the east courtyard was blocked by a few wooden planks. An old man was taking a nap at the door. However, when the old man heard the clamor, he didn't wake up from his stupor. However, after glancing at the few of them, he continued with what he was doing, not even sparing them a glance. He had been in Zhang Feng's mansion for a month. During this month, everyone in the mansion knew about this place. No one dared to barge in. Therefore, he thought Niu Jinda and the others were passing by and going to the pavilion in the middle of the lake. However, he was wrong this time. Niu Jinda and the others went straight to the old man. When they saw that the old man was still taking a nap, the servants were annoyed. Old man, open the door. Master's guests are going to the courtyard. The old man woke up with a start. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and carefully whipped Niu Jianhu. After making sure that master was not around, he changed his position and continued to take a nap. Niu Jinda was put in a difficult position. It was not easy to solve the problem in front of him. He did not expect that the old man here would be so difficult to deal with. The servant also seemed to feel that he had lost face. With a cold face, he glared at the old man and said, "Old master, I've received orders from the master to bring the honored guest. Ask old master to personally tell this old man. Otherwise, even if you're the heavenly king, Lao Tzu won't let you in." This time, Niu Jinda's interest was piqued. Smiling, Niu Jinda squatted beside the old man and handed him a cigarette, but the old man didn't even flick it. Niu Jinda still squinted his eyes and just changed his posture. The corner of Niu Jinda's mouth twitched in anger. This plan didn't seem to work. Grandpa, Fengzi is busy with the autumn planting on the mountain now. If it weren't for something, Fengzi would have come down with me. Do you know why I came here directly this time? The old man's interest was also piqued. He wanted to see what kind of lie this guy was going to weave. Back then, Fengzi had said that other than him, no one was allowed to enter. What was this? This was an order. This old man had lived for more than half his life. What kind of battle had he not seen? Just this? He wanted to lie to him? This was all rubbish. He had played with the leftovers. After all, he had been at the bottom for his whole life. If he couldn't learn this, he could only starve to death. Niu Jinda was also in a dilemma. Why was this old guy so stubborn? Out of desperation, he was about to use force. After all, this was the last step. However, at this moment, Niu Jianhu sighed sadly and said, Fengzi, you should come back. Look at how we've been bullied when you weren't at home. If others were to know about this, they would think that everyone in your residence is such a bully. And do you have to do this? In order to let the people of the world have enough to eat, you don't even want your home? We just listened to you and came back to the East Court to get some things. Look, what are these? I told you to come back, but you didn't listen. Now, this is great. Hearing this, Niu Jinda's eyes turned and said, Isn't that so? This kid even said that there's something in the East Court that can comfort the people of the world and asked us to come and see it. Fine. Let's go. We don't have this blessing, son. Hearing this, the old man finally opened his eyes. He was a little hesitant. It was reasonable to say that Zhang Feng had told them more than once before. This was a secret that ordinary people were not allowed to disclose. Moreover, in the family, only the three old men and Zhang Feng knew about this. But now, how did the two of them know? If they continued to make trouble like this, what would happen? Hurriedly, the old man sighed and said, Forget it, I'm just going to do something. It's not like I'm not letting you in. Do you have to do this? Also, the thing that you said is related to the safety of the world's people is not here. There are only some precious flowers and plants. If you're talking nonsense, I'll report it to the family head. This time, everyone couldn't help but be stunned. Instead, they felt that there was something shameful in this courtyard. At this time, Niu Jinda was even more certain that there must be some secret in this courtyard. However, at this time, it was accidentally exposed by him and his son. He hurriedly said, Oh, this is not a joke. Don't think too much, this is a joke. Let's go, let's go in and take a look. What's wrong with that? Chapter 13:12. No way. However, the old man was very stubborn. He stared at the crowd indifferently and said, Master said to let the two of you in, but he didn't say to let them in. Besides, if you step on the flowers and plants, you can afford to pay for it, but can they? Don't you see that even I don't dare to go in casually? Isn't it because I'm afraid of stepping on these things? Niu Jinda slapped his forehead and said, Yes, yes, yes. Fengzi said that the reason why he didn't let us in was that he was afraid of stepping on the snow lotus that only exists on Tianshan Mountain. Fengzi also said that this thing was given to Xiaohu to treat his leg. I was in a hurry just now and forgot about it. Sorry. Everyone. Niu Jinda clasped his fists. Only then did the crowd leave in shock. Seeing this, the old man heaved a sigh of relief. With trembling hands, he opened a small gap to let the two enter. After that, he didn't forget to remind, Old Master Niu, although I don't know what exactly you want to do, you are Old Master's brother. I hope that you can keep this secret. If outsiders were to know, Old Master would instantly become the target of public criticism. Seeing this, Niu Jinda hurriedly and cautiously nodded, Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. After saying that, Niu Jinda slowly supported Niu Jianhu into the east court. The old man also locked the wooden board and sat at the door to take a nap again. East Court. There were indeed countless rare and exotic herbs in the East Court. However, in the East Court, there seemed to be 8 sides. However, it also seemed to be a smaller version of the entire court. It was also divided into 4 areas, north, south, east, and west. These 4 areas were separated by waterside pavilions and flowing water. The entire East Court looked more elegant. However, in the depths of the East Court, there was smoke rising from time to time. This made Niu Jinda and Niu Jianhu look at each other and quicken their steps. Previously, they had only vaguely guessed. However, after talking nonsense just now, they did not expect this old man to be really afraid. That was to say, the secret of this court was really the cultivation location of the thing that could multiply the production? With this thought in mind, the two of them couldn't help but speed up. Although the east courtyard wasn't big, the winding paths and waterside pavilions allowed the two of them to vaguely see through the gaps between the bamboo forest and the rare herbs. But a moment later, the two of them finally walked out of the garden. What entered their eyes made them flabbergasted. In the innermost part of the innermost row of houses in the east courtyard, where the sun shone the brightest, there was a straw shed that did not fit in with the environment. It attracted their attention. On one side of the straw hut, a large stove was burning fiercely. A pot of water was boiling in the pot, and steam was rising in spirals. However, the two old men seemed to be used to this. Instead, they were squatting in the corner, smoking and chatting. At this moment, an old man turned his head and saw Niu Jianhu in a white robe. He hurriedly became alert and asked, Who are you? Who let you in? As they spoke, the two old men hurriedly picked up the grass on the ground and desperately tried to cover something behind them. The sharp-eyed Niu Jinda instantly noticed the wooden trough behind them, as well as something he had never seen before. It was as tall as a chopstick. Niu Jinda was secretly shocked. This wasn't wheat. What was this? But this wasn't the time to think about this. He smiled and said, Don't worry, we are Feng Zi's brothers. This time, we came on Feng Zi's instructions. We didn't come for any other purpose. We just came to see that thing. Niu Jinda pointed to the thing behind them. The two old men looked at each other and hurriedly said, What is it? There's nothing here except flowers and plants. You can go. Phosphate fertilizer. Feng Zi is not free. He asked me and my father to see the phosphate fertilizer so that we can go back and tell him about it. Niu Jianhu's voice made the two of them let down their guard. Regarding the phosphate fertilizer, apart from the dean and a few people from Chang'an University, no one knew about it. But these two guys, why did they look so unfamiliar? One of the old men in yellow asked, You said you are the brothers of the head of your family, but why haven't we seen you before? Niu Jinda heard this and laughed. Old man, you might as well go back and ask the servants in the courtyard. Alright, you can go and ask now. We won't move. Let's talk about it after you figure out our identity. This time. the two old men still didn't let down their guard. The old man in yellow whispered a few words in the ear of the other old man, and then hurriedly ran out. After a while, he came in with a frown. When he walked to Niu Jinda and Niu Jianhu's side and saw Niu Jianhu's leg, he said in surprise, "Are you the guy who came back after the dean used the blood-snatching life-exchanging technique?" Niu Jianhu heard this and pointed to his right leg, saying, "Thanks to Feng Zi. Otherwise, I would have gone to hell by now." After confirming their identity, the old man in yellow breathed a sigh of relief and said, "So it's you. Let's go. Master is really too much. He personally said that except for him, no one is allowed to come here. Why did he go back on his words?" Chapter 13:13. At this moment, he was no longer on guard. Niu Jinda returned to his normal self. He chatted with the two old men and smoked. He didn't mention that matter at all. After seeing that the two old men were almost fooled, Niu Jinda looked curiously at the thing covered by the thatch and asked, "Old man, what is this?" "Oh, this." One of the old men was about to say something, but he was bumped by the yellow-clothed old man, and his voice was cut off. This made Niu Jinda a little disappointed. But at this moment, the yellow-clothed old man said, "This is something that the old master got from a merchant in the western region." The old master didn't say what it was. He just asked us to take care of it carefully. It's been a month, and this thing has only grown to this extent. While speaking, the yellow-clothed old man carefully lifted a potato sprout. Niu Jinda and Niu Jianhu immediately surrounded him. After looking around, they really couldn't find what this thing was. Anyway, this thing was definitely not food. They couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. But he inadvertently saw a little white thing on the wooden trough. Niu Jinda asked, "This thing, has it always been phosphate fertilizer?" The yellow-clothed old man nodded and then shook his head. "No, this phosphate fertilizer was made by the old master a few days ago. It was only used a few days ago." "Then may I ask, old man, is this thing a medicinal herb?" The potato sprout was green and had a dark green color. However, his strange appearance was somewhat similar to those of those exotic plants and medicinal materials. As for food, forget it. They were also experienced and knowledgeable people. When had they ever seen such food? They were a little disappointed. The yellow-clothed old man took advantage of the situation and said, "Yes, I heard that this thing seems to be a kind of medicinal herb, but the old master didn't say what it is. When we picked the yellow leaf before, we tasted it. It didn't have much taste. It was sour, and numb." Niu Jinda was surprised when he heard that. Seeing that, the old man carefully squatted in front of the exposed potato sprout and looked at it again and again. Finally, he picked a slightly yellow leaf at the bottom and handed it to Niu Jinda, saying, "You don't believe me? Have a taste." Niu Jinda really didn't believe it. He took the potato leaf and tasted it. It was really a little numb, and there was a bitter taste. What kind of food was this? This was clearly a medicinal ingredient, all right? Niu Jinda couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. He also wanted to leave. After all this time, what kind of secret did this kid have? This trip could be considered a waste. When the time comes, if that brat knew, he would fly into a rage and dig a hole in his nose. But what else could he do? Niu Jinda, who was once again disinterested, chatted with the two old men for a while before he got up and left. After Niu Jinda and the other man left, the two old men heaved a deep sigh of relief. After looking at each other, the yellow-clothed old man hurriedly said, "I keep feeling that something is wrong with this matter. You keep an eye on it. I will immediately go up the mountain to ask about the situation." "All right, go and come back quickly. I'm afraid that I won't be able to deal with those two if they come back later." Just now, the old man had almost told them about the potatoes. If the yellow-clothed old man hadn't reacted quickly enough, he would have died. But this thing was also very strange to them. Zhang Feng said that this thing was food. But this thing didn't look like food at all. If you said that it was a medicinal ingredient, it looked a little like it. It was delicate and would break with a touch. It was very difficult for them to figure out what the use of this thing was. After all, food was nothing more than growing on the ears or on the waist of this thing. But what about this thing? Not to mention the fruit, it was even difficult to make it grow upright. Where was the fruit? This was what puzzled them the most. Just now, the yellow-clothed old man was not wrong. Therefore, the yellow-clothed old man tore off a piece of potato leaf and let the old bull taste it. This leaf was still in Niu Jinda's hand at this time. He also couldn't figure out what this thing was. If he said that the two old men were lying, it was not to the extent that he had seen many Zhuang family, whether it was in the Tang dynasty or in the extraterritorial region. But there was really nothing that was exactly the same as this thing. Most importantly, this thing didn't look like food at all. Could it be that we made a mistake? Niu Jinda sighed and looked at Niu Jianhu. Niu Jianhu glanced at the big leaf in Niu Jinda's hand and said, "Why don't we go to Lord Feng's mansion now?" Niu Jinda shook his head and said, "Now is not the time. We can go to Old Hei's mansion in the evening and ask. If we go rashly now, do you think that group of old guys will say anything? Then what should we do?" Niu Jianhu was also in a dilemma. Niu Jinda stopped and looked at the gurgling water. Suddenly he smiled and said, "It's okay. You go back to the mansion now and plow all the fields in the mansion that can be cultivated. Also, take out all the savings in the family and buy land for me. If it's still not enough, go and borrow some for me." Niu Jinda stared at the flowing water with shining eyes and said excitedly, "I have a feeling that something big is going to happen this time. The more fields we have, the better." Chapter 13-14. In Duke Liang's mansion. At this time, several people began to tremble violently. It was as if they were drunk and had a headache. This was because they were so excited. After knowing what happened on the mountain yesterday, they couldn't wait to go home and take out all their savings to buy land. This time, Zhang Feng was really generous. Not only did he really use the phosphate fertilizer for the autumn planting, but he also tinkered with something that could produce phosphate fertilizer without being poisoned. The most important thing was that the method of selecting seeds was simply unheard of. If this thing was really as Zhang Feng described, then with the phosphate fertilizer, the yield per mu could reach 1,000 caddies. What was the difference between that and playing? This was not the point. The point was, at this time, they were all urgently selling the excess land in their hands. Everyone couldn't help but have an impulse to beat themselves to death. They also had an impulse to beat Feng Xianling to death. "Damn bastard, why didn't you tell us earlier if you wanted to change things after knowing? We all said we were colleagues. Was it necessary?" But Feng Xianling seemed to enjoy the atmosphere at this time. He said with a smile, everyone, don't be impatient. I believe that the Emperor will summon us tomorrow. It's not too late to go back and arrange everything tonight. You've been sitting here for 4 hours. If you don't eat before leaving, wouldn't it be said that I, Feng Xianling, don't know the ways of the world? Come on, prepare the banquet. Wait. Zhang Sun Wuji was the first one who couldn't sit still. After all, he had the most land here. This time, if the Emperor really knew about this, once he came to find them, he would definitely take back part of the land. After all, he had complained about this to Empress Zhongxin yesterday. What if the Empress had really said something to the Emperor last night? Then now, how could he sit still when he thought of this? Feng Xianling and the others naturally knew about this. They smiled and said, "This is easy. Someone, quickly bring me a brush and ink." "Brother Zhongsun, why don't you write a letter and send it home first? Isn't it the same?" Zhang Sun Wuji thought about it and agreed. He sat down with a clear conscience. When everyone saw this, they picked up their brushes and ink and sent a letter back to their families. Just as everyone was preparing for the banquet, there was a sudden commotion at the entrance of the Duke Liang's mansion. A moment later, Feng Xuanling's servant hurried into the living room. Feng Xianling frowned slightly. "Didn't I tell you? I have important matters to discuss with the dukes. Can I not disturb you? Master, His Majesty? His Majesty is here." "What?" Hearing this, everyone stood up in unison. He looked at the servant in shock. When Feng Xianling heard this, he asked in disbelief, "Are you telling the truth?" "Yes. Now little Gizi's father-in-law is at the door." He said it himself. This time, everyone couldn't help but change their expressions. "What should we do?" The few of them couldn't help but wonder why the Emperor came here at this time. However, there was no need to think about it. It must be because of this matter. They didn't dare to delay. They hurried out of the living room and went to the yard to meet the emperor. When they arrived, Li Shimin, who was wearing a purple robe and waving a folding fan, had already entered the mansion. When they saw this, they hurriedly bowed. Li Shimin said lightly, "That's enough. You don't have to do that outside. Let's go in and talk." After that, Li Shimin went straight to the living room. As soon as he entered the living room, Li Shimin couldn't help frowning slightly. He asked, looking at the smoke and dust in the room, "You seem to have been here for a long time?" As he spoke, Li Shimin took out a white object from his bosom under the astonished gazes of several people, and hung it on his mouth and ear. They had seen and heard of this thing. This thing was called a mask. It was made by Feng Zi. It was also because of this thing that the extraction of phosphate fertilizer was faster. It wouldn't poison people. Li Shimin looked at everyone. After sitting down, he waved his hand and said, "Sit down." After they sat down, Li Shimin looked at the cigarette butts all over the floor. He originally wanted to smoke, but after thinking about it, he didn't. He asked, "I think you all should know what happened on the mountain, right?" They didn't know what to say. They just giggled. How could Li Shimin not know? He just sighed and said, "Originally, I wanted to reduce your burden when I came back this time. Last night, the Empress told me that you were under too much pressure and asked me to reduce your burden." Zhang Sun Wuji's face froze. He didn't dare to speak. Speaking at this time was completely asking for death. How could Li Shimin not see through their thoughts? There were no fools here. The moment Li Shimin saw them, he understood a lot. At this time, when he saw their expressions, how could he not know that they knew everything? Alas. Forget it, forget it. Let's talk about this matter. Minister Feng, what do you think of this matter? Also, I heard from Feng Zi that you went to the field outside the city to eat soil with him. Is this true? Chapter 13:15. It was inevitable that Feng Xianling would be embarrassed to talk about this at this time, but Li Shimin did it on purpose. He was a little angry about it. After all, such a big thing had to be hidden from him. How many things did he not know? Moreover, he had bumped into him today, causing his wishful thinking to fall through. How could he not vent his anger? Feng Xianling and the others were very clear about it. At this time, hearing the emperor's question, he had to say, "Your Majesty, I was going to report it to your Majesty. But on the one hand, the ceremony is coming soon, and Feng Zi is just talking about it. So, I didn't take it seriously. I thought that after everything was clear, I would report it to your Majesty. We have come here precisely to discuss this matter. After all, this matter concerns the fate of my great Tang, and any mishap would be a disaster for the people of the realm. After all, although I heard my son speak of this matter last night, it is simply too absurd. Thus, this old subject has come today to ask my lords about it. But I didn't know that you didn't return to your mansion last night because of other things." Feng Xianling also cried out in grievance. What else could Li Shimin do? He could only twitch his mouth. Well, it's true. When I was on the mountain today, I saw Feng Zi do it myself. But at this time, the food is not enough. If we really do the seed selection at this time, the people will inevitably have a shortage of seeds. You all know the situation of my treasury. So, my dear ministers, I'll leave this matter to you. What could they say? They couldn't say anything. As long as the emperor didn't take back their fields, this was the lightest punishment. Li Shimin asked at this time, "Minister Feng, I want to ask you. Feng Zi said that the soil was sour. Tell me, is what Feng Zi said true?" Feng Xianling nodded. He recounted his conversation with Zhang Feng that day, the difference between the two soils after tasting them, and the new type of irrigation that Zhang Feng had mentioned. If Feng Xianling continued to hide the truth, then he would be the one who didn't know how to appreciate favors. After all, at this time, the emperor did not pursue the matter. He just wanted to ask about the situation that day. Who knew what that brat Zhang Feng said to the emperor on the mountain? After Feng Xianling finished speaking, everyone was stunned. Photosynthesis, irrigation in water, pesticides, and so on. These were all like heavenly books, leaving everyone dumbfounded. Only Li Shimin, who had a rough understanding of the situation, felt that it was very interesting. However, Although Li Shimin still looked normal on the surface, his heart had long been set off a monstrous wave. What is this? This was the mountain river map that Feng Zi had drawn for him. At first, when Zhang Feng said it on the mountain, although he felt it was a little unbelievable, he still didn't dare to believe it. But now, at this time, combined with what Feng Xianling and Feng Yai had seen and heard, Li Shimin couldn't help but believe it. Dear ministers, today Feng Zi said that as long as we have a bumper harvest this autumn, the Tang dynasty will basically never enter an era of famine again. Do you believe it? Several people were silent. They didn't dare to make a decision easily. After all, this matter was too big. Li Shimin waited for a while. Seeing that no one spoke, he lit a cigarette. His hands trembled, and he didn't mind the smoke in the room. He slowly and fiercely smoked the cigarette. Today, when I heard for the first time that the grain that was originally 5 dan per mu could be increased to 10 dan per mu, I really wanted to. After all, you have seen that after years of war, not to mention the people, even the national treasury is empty at this time. Empty? Why do you think I want to go up the mountain every day? Do you know how long I sleep every day? Less than 3 hours. Every night, I would dream of thousands of wronged souls grabbing me and asking for a bite of food. I also dreamed that my brothers who had died in the war were questioning me why I didn't let their families have enough to eat. I am ashamed to face them. Only at Feng Zi's place can I have a moment of peace and relaxation, but today, Feng Zi told me that the prosperous era I dreamed of is at my fingertips. At this time, I am very doubtful whether this is a dream or real. Li Shimin spoke very calmly. However, everyone lowered their heads in shame. Even Yu Qigong and Cheng Yaojin's shoulders were trembling slightly. But they still didn't dare to speak. After all, they had dreamed of what the emperor dreamed of. Li Shimin sighed again, looked at Wei Zheng and said, Prime Minister Wei, can you wake me up again? Tell me, is this true? Wei Zheng also choked. He knelt on the ground excitedly and cried, Your Majesty, all of this is true. This is true, not a dream. The good days of the Tang dynasty are coming. Chapter 13:16. Silence. A deathly silence. It was so quiet that a pin drop could be heard in the spacious living room. Everyone was waiting and pondering, but no one spoke. The sun was setting in the west, and they sat there until it was time for the lamp to be turned off. Li Shimin came back to his senses. Looking at the moonlight that lit up the whole hall, he said slowly, What's wrong? This is a good thing. Why do you all look so sad? I'm hungry. Prepare the food. His words were like an amnesty for everyone, and they all heaved a sigh of relief. And Feng Xianling hurriedly shouted, Come on, prepare it quickly. Forget it. I want to eat a bowl of noodles, a bowl of sour soup noodles. So, at this time, everyone wanted to vomit when they heard this word. But the emperor was here, and because of the darkness, Li Shimin didn't notice the strange expressions on everyone's faces. After a while, the lamp in the living room was finally lit. At the same time, a bowl of noodles with a strong sour smell was served. Li Shimin looked at the noodles and waved his hand. Come on, let's eat. This is good food. Back then, While Li Shimin was recalling the good things of the past, on the other side, Niu Jinda and Niu Jianhu also quietly appeared at the gate of Feng Xuanling's mansion. Originally, Niu Jinda wanted to let Niu Jianhu go back, but this guy quickly went back to deal with the matter and then turned back. Niu Jinda had no choice. After all, they were already here. He had to take him with him and show off by the way. And also at this time, Xiao Gizi whispered in Li Shimin's ear, Your Majesty, General Niu is here. Li Shimin was stunned. Sure enough, he just remembered that Niu Jinda didn't seem to come this time. He asked in surprise, Isn't Niu Jinda recuperating? What is he doing here? When he asked this question, they couldn't help but be shocked. This old thing came this time. Could it be that he had also heard some rumors? Everyone's guesses were actually quite unreasonable. After all, the guards on the mountain were all veterans under him and Yu Qigong. Li Shimin also found it interesting and asked, You're saying that Niu Jianhu is here too? Little Gizi nodded in disbelief and said, Your Majesty, yes, and I walked over. At this moment, everyone in the hall was dumbfounded. They all knew about the matter of a cow breaking a tiger's leg. But how long had it been? Half a month? He could walk now? Even if a godly doctor had descended to the mortal world, he wouldn't be able to do that, right? Li Shimin's interest was also piqued. He asked, "Are you sure he walked over like a normal person?" Xiao Gizi replied, "Your Majesty, that's not the case. He uses crutches, but his movements are no different from ordinary people. If this servant didn't know that his leg was broken, this servant wouldn't believe it either." "Quick, let them in." Li Shimin didn't care what they were here for. Anyway, they were here for this matter. After a while, Li Shimin and the others saw Niu Jianhu and Niu Jinda appear at the door of the hall with crutches one after another. "Niu Jinda and Niu Jianhu pay their respects to your Majesty." "Rise, Jinhu. Come forward quickly and let me see your leg." Li Shimin was completely attracted by Niu Jianhu's leg at this moment. How could he remember anything else? Niu Jianhu heard this and looked at the other dukes in the hall. Then he used his crutches and tried to maintain his manners as he walked slowly toward Li Shimin. Although he had tried to maintain his manners, he looked extremely awkward at this moment. However, this didn't matter because everyone's eyes were fixed on Niu Jianhu's leg at this moment. There seemed to be something extraordinary in that place. This was indeed extraordinary. After all, once this matter was confirmed, it was conceivable that the era of amputated limbs being sawed off or waiting for death would become a thing of the past. When Niu Jianhu stood beside Li Shimin lifted Niu Jianhu's robe and looked at the leg wrapped in bandages and exposed bamboo clips under his robe. He pointed to a chair next to him and said, "Sit down. Little Gizi, let him lie down as much as possible. I want to take a closer look at his leg." "Your Majesty, you can't, Your Majesty." "Your Majesty, this is a great disrespect. My son can't bear it. How about Your Majesty move to the guest room?" Everyone turned pale with fright when they heard this. After hurriedly dissuading him, Li Shimin gave up and said, "Let's go to the guest room." Li Shimin was already inexplicably excited at this time. On the way to the guest room, he hurriedly said, "By the way, quickly go and ask Imperial Dr. Zhou to come. He should have seen Jianhu's bone with his own eyes. Let him examine Jianhu and see how the bone is." Little Gizi hurriedly accepted the order and left. The rest of the people turned and entered the guest room. The guest room was very dark, but when Li Shimin and the others entered the room, the oil lamps were already lit. In an instant, the whole room became as bright as day. At this time, under Li Shimin's insistence, Niu Jianhu lay on the bed. However, Niu Jianhu, who was lying on the bed, was extremely nervous. But at this time, his right leg had already appeared in Li Shimin's hands. Chapter 13:17. At this time, Wei Zheng was about to say something when he saw this, but he was stopped by Zhang Sun Wuji. "Prime Minister Wei, you may be able to understand His Majesty's mood at this time. Every year, because of such things, the people who lost arms and legs, or the soldiers, can only wait for death or have their legs cut off. Those who are dead are better. At most, they suffer a little. But have you ever thought that those who are alive suffer more than death? You'd better let His Majesty confirm it." Indeed, Wei Jing knew these things. After all, the annual supplies for the disabled in the country basically went through him. He also knew that if such magical medical skills could really be developed, it would be very beneficial to the Tang dynasty. But did His Majesty need to check it himself? That would be a loss of His Majesty's dignity. But at this time, Wei Jing opened his mouth, but held himself back in the end. Alas! In the end he sighed. However, Li Shimin and the others did not notice this. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Niu Jianhu's leg. Li Shimin gently knocked on Niu Jianhu's leg and then asked, "Is there anything unusual about the wound? Or is there any pain?" Niu Jianhu scratched his head, glanced at Niu Jinda first, and then said, "Your Majesty, my leg is basically fine. When I woke up, I did feel a little pain, but after lying in bed for 3 days, my leg felt limp and numb as if there were ants gnawing on it." But with Fengzi and Dr. Sun's magical medical skills, there is no abnormality at all now. It's just that when the legs touch the ground, there will be a slight numbness and pain. If you walk, it won't be a big problem for the time of a cigarette, But if you walk for a long time, it will still be a little sore. Everyone was in an uproar. Niu Jinda, on the other hand, felt that his back was straighter at this moment. He took over the conversation and said, "Your Majesty, this Fengzi is also amazing." He said that every day he has to cook a big bone for the tiger. Moreover, besides a little bit of salt, he doesn't put anything else in the soup. You see, if this kid didn't have a walking stick, even this old official would think that this kid is slacking off. Li Shimin asked in surprise, "Tell me, is this his daily medicine?" Li Shimin thought that there was some magical medicine and prescription in it. He originally wanted to get it and pass it down as a big reward in the future, so that the people and the doctors in the world would be grateful to him. But how could he know that it was so simple? Hearing this, Niu Jinda hurriedly said, No, Your Majesty, this is the prescription given by Fengzi. He said that it takes 100 days to heal the bones and tendons. He said that he has to drink this thing as much as he can to heal the broken bones. However, Divine Doctor's son gave him an extremely ordinary prescription. This is what puzzles me the most. Divine Doctor's son clearly told my son to abstain from meat and fish, but when it came to Fengzi, he asked my son to drink the nourishing soup as much as he could. This, Li Shimin and the others were also confused. Did you bring the prescription? Yes, I did. Let me have a look. This thing contradicts itself, so how can it be fused together? If they listened to Dr. Sun, these things would be fatal. But for Zhang Feng, these things became a life-saving prescription. Who was Li Shimin? How could he not know these things? He had heard of medicinal cuisine before, but he had never heard of it before. How could such a life-threatening illness be treated with something so nutritious? Moreover, he was able to make Niu Jinhu jump around in such a short period of less than a month? This was it was amazing. However, just when Li Shimin wanted to take off the bandages and the bamboo clips, Wei Jing finally couldn't help but say, Your Majesty, please wait for Imperial Physician Zhou to come and let the Imperial Physician do it. How about it? This is so dirty. This time, Yu Qigong and the others couldn't listen to it anymore. He directly interrupted Wei Zheng and said, Prime Minister Wei, Jinhu is the son of Niu Jinhu. If you say that Jinhu is dirty, are you saying that Niu Jinhu and I are dirty? No. Wei Zheng hurriedly explained, Your Majesty is the Emperor. How can you be contaminated by such things? Hearing this, Yu Qigong and the others angrily snorted. Li Shimin didn't care. He waved his hand and said with a smile, Don't quarrel. In my eyes, this is not a leg. This is something that can save the lives of all the troops stationed in the Tang dynasty in the future. Think about it. How many of our brothers had to stay in those desolate places forever because of this? This time, everyone was silent. Then they said in unison, Your Majesty is righteous. Your Majesty, Imperial Physician Zhou is here. At this time, Shao Gizi slowly entered the guest room and said. Hearing this, Li Shimin sighed and said, Well, let him in. Chapter 13:18. Imperial Dr. Zhou was originally thinking about the mask at home. The more he thought about it, the more he found it interesting. This thing suddenly gave him a magical tool that could cure diseases and isolate plagues in advance. But at this moment, a servant hurriedly brought in little Gizi, which surprised Imperial Dr. Zhou. After all, something big must have happened for the Emperor's personal eunuch to come in person in the middle of the night. Then, little Gizi didn't say anything and just asked him to take care of things. Then he went all the way to Fang Xuanling's mansion, which surprised Imperial Dr. Zhou a little. After all, Fang Xuanling's health had been poor before. But since Prince Zhang Feng made the bone-strengthening powder for him, his waist was no longer bent. He was no longer out of breath and even looked a little younger. What happened in the middle of the night? But when he plunged into the guest room, he couldn't help but tremble all over. He hurriedly bowed and said, Zhou Hongru greets Your Majesty and all the dukes. Okay, Imperial Dr. Zhou, come and take a look at Jinhu's leg. Li Shimin couldn't wait any longer and waved his hand directly. At this time, Imperial Dr. Zhou had time to look around the room seriously. He knew about Niu Jinhu's incident. After all, who didn't know about such a big thing? Moreover, This matter had alarmed all the great Confucians of the medical world of the Great Tang, but the mountain was too heavily guarded, and no one was allowed to go up. They could only send letters to divine Dr. Sun to ask for advice. But, even so, everyone wanted to know whether Niu Jianhu's leg was really broken and exposed on the street or it was a lie. After all, the bone was crooked and exposed. Moreover, it had been exposed for 3 days. Even if a pig's bone had been exposed for such a long time, it would have rotted long ago, let alone a living person's leg. Although he had witnessed everything with his own eyes and participated in it, even so, he still felt that it was a dream. In the blink of an eye, almost a month had passed. Since Niu Jianhu returned to the mansion, there had been no news about him. This made everyone mistakenly think that it was a rumor. Even he felt that all of this was fake. However, was this fake? This was real. At this time, how could Imperial Dr. Zhou still care about his identity? He knelt beside Niu Jianhu's bed and carefully removed the layers of gauze according to Niu Jianhu's instructions, revealing rows of bamboo clips. At this time, although there was some blood in the gap of the bamboo clip, there was a strange smell like wine in the blood. Imperial Dr. Zhou couldn't help but ask, "What is this?" Niu Jianhu scratched his beard and said, "You've seen this before. It's alcohol. Fengzi said that we have to make some every day. He said that it's sterilizing and disinfecting. I don't understand. You're an imperial physician. Tell me, what is this magical thing? Why does it smell like wine? If it weren't for Fengzi's strict order not to drink, I would want to try it." Imperial Dr. Zhou's face turned black. How would he know what this thing was? But Li Shimin didn't think so. After all, Imperial Dr. Zhou had witnessed the healing of Niu Jianhu's leg with his own eyes. Wasn't this thing something that he had to study every day? He asked, "Imperial Dr. Zhou, I also want to know what this thing is." This, Imperial Dr. Zhou was in a dilemma. How would he know what this thing was? Even if he had heard of alcohol, how could he have a chance to get a little bit of it? But at this time, the emperor asked so. If he dared to say that he didn't know, that would be the consequence. He was clear. He hurriedly said in a cold sweat, "Your Majesty, this alcohol. I'm also studying it. It's a good thing. As General Jianhu said, this thing can disinfect and sterilize. Without this thing, I don't think Brother Hu's leg would have recovered so quickly." This time, everyone finally understood. It turned out that this boy had set a trap for them here. If Imperial Dr. Zhou hadn't witnessed it in person, everyone would have been deceived. They would really think that this big bone soup really had such a magical effect. But Li Shimin still didn't give up and asked, "Then tell me, what does this big bone soup mean? Why didn't Fengzi prescribe him any medicine, but let him drink this thing every day? God F*** King knows this. Damn boy, why did you do this?" Imperial Dr. Zhou wanted to cry but had no tears. But he still braced himself and said, "This thing is Prince Zhang's secret. I'm stupid and don't know it for the time being." Li Shimin was slightly disappointed. But there was a trace of heat in his eyes. He had to get the secret recipe of this thing. What was it? This was Zhang Feng's true ability, wasn't it? Do you think I'm so easy to fool? Do you think I'm too simple? Li Shimin looked at Niu Jianhu's leg at this time and smiled slightly. However, his smile made Niu Jianhu shiver uncontrollably. Chapter 1319. Li Shimin was very happy. He did not stop laughing for almost the whole night. He was even woken up by his own laughter in the middle of the night. After breakfast, Li Shimin went to the morning court while humming a tune under the suspicious gaze of Empress Zhangsun, who had been yawning all the time. Empress Zhangsun couldn't help but think that something had happened to the emperor. Was he stupid? As the morning bell rang, Li Shimin appeared in the back hall of the political announcement palace early. He drank tea and looked through the screen at the ministers doing morning exercises in the square outside the palace. When he thought of the prosperous scene described by Zhang Feng, Li Shimin couldn't help but have an illusion. Wasn't this the so-called prosperous time? After the change of the Xuanwu Gate and the Wei River Alliance, Li Shimin had never felt so comfortable before. At this time, he actually imagined that he didn't even need to go to the morning court at this time next year. If he could chat with Zhang Feng on Shao Mountain every day, and then deal with the government affairs while talking and laughing, this must be the life of an immortal, right? But when he thought of Zhang Feng's future, Li Shimin couldn't help but sigh. At that time, if this brat were to find out my identity one day, what should I do? How could I continue to be so heartless with that stinky guy? Your Majesty, it's time to go to the morning court. When Li Shimin was letting his imagination run wild, Xiao Gizi's voice pulled him back to reality. Li Shimin sighed slightly and shook his head, saying, "Go to the morning court. Your Majesty is here. Welcome, Your Majesty. Long live the Emperor." On the 8-step ladder to heaven, Li Shimin couldn't help but stop. He turned around, looked at the ministers holding white jade tablets, and asked, "Rise?" Just now, when I was watching your morning exercises, I suddenly had the illusion that I wanted to continue watching. I also thought of something a close friend once said. We have already written a copy of this sentence. Little Gizi, bring it up. Li Shimin waved his hand. 2 eunuchs hurriedly walked into the main hall with a word carved from red sandalwood. Then, under Li Shimin's instructions, they looked at all the ministers. Did you see that? It was this saying that water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize it. 8 words. Today, I'm thinking if I were the emperor, for example, if all the people of the Tang dynasty were water, would this lone boat be able to hold on? None of the ministers knew what the emperor wanted to say. But to be able to be here, which one of them was easy to deal with? The moment they understood this, many ministers hurriedly knelt and turned pale with fright. Your Majesty, we don't dare to say this. Our Tang dynasty will always be strong, and you are the emperor. How can you be a lone boat? It must be a big boat that stretches as far as the eye can see, Your Majesty. Li Shimin waved his hand. Indeed, if this small boat goes against the current, it will definitely capsize one day. That's why I need a group of helmsmen, and you are my helmsman, the helmsman of our Tang dynasty. We obey the emperor's order. Everyone loudly said in unison. No one understood what the emperor wanted to do. Even Wei Zheng and the others didn't know what the emperor wanted to say today. Li Shimin waved his hand and said, Later, Minister Fang, you are responsible for asking the Secretariat and the Ministry of Works to make 100 copies of this calligraphy and give them to each of you. Before, everything in our Tang dynasty was proceeding in an orderly manner, and we could even see a trace of a prosperous era. But it was an insignificant drought. Who would have thought that such a plague of locusts would break out? And there was such a serious famine after the plague of locusts? Although this matter has passed, you should have seen that the Achilles heel of our Tang dynasty is food. You should have heard about what happened to General Niu earlier, right? Someone deliberately embezzled the ironware that the people urgently need for autumn planting. What is this? Although it seems to be targeting the people, in fact, each of you here has at least hundreds of acres of fertile land in your family, right? This time, Wei Zheng and the others seem to have realized something. But at this time, even he dared not say anything. If the emperor used him as an example, then, so at this time, they all closed their mouths tightly and pretended to be contemplating. Li Shimin glanced at the crowd and then said, The night before the autumn planting worship ceremony, Empress Zhangsun received several people who wanted me to take back the fertile land that I had previously rewarded. I won't name names here because I know your pain. But today I will give you one more chance. After I finish this matter, if anyone still wants to take back the land, I don't care who it is, I will allow it. At this time, everyone was dumbfounded. At this time, the fertile land had long been a sore point for all the ministers. But why did the emperor say such inexplicable words as soon as he came to court today? At this time, an old minister in a purple robe stepped forward and said, I, Kongingda, have a report to the emperor. Li Shimin smiled slightly. He waved his hand and said, My dear minister, don't be impatient. Wait for me to finish, okay? Chapter 1320. Who is Kongingda? He was an important official of the Shandong landowning households in the imperial court. He was deeply trusted by Li Shimin, but because of the mysterious hand behind the scenes and the current situation, Kongingda became suspicious. Li Shimin could not help but be slightly wary and suspicious of Kongingda. He hadn't said anything yet, but Kongingda had already jumped out. What did that mean? It meant that he was guilty. However, Li Shimin wasn't in a hurry. He wanted to bait slowly. Li Shimin looked at Kong Yingda lightly and said with a smile, Mr. Kong, this matter is related to your lives. Do you want to wait for me to finish speaking and then talk about it, or do you want to talk about it now? Kong Yingda hesitated. He still wanted to say something, but at this moment, Fang Xianling interrupted Kong Yingda and said, Kong Gong. Kong Yingda glanced at Fang Xianling and sighed. He didn't say anything. Li Shimin glanced at Fang Xianling and said, Fine, you go first. After that, Li Shimin sat on the dragon throne and narrowed his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Kong Yingda saw this and said, Your Majesty, I want to impeach a few people. Hearing this, everyone was in an uproar. Li Shimin seemed to have predicted this. He waved his hand and motioned for Kong Yingda to continue. Kong Yingda took a step forward and said, Your Majesty, previously the Chancellor of the White Deer Institute, a brat named Zhang Feng, used some unknown method to plagiarize some poems from somewhere and fooled Mr. Bo Shi and the others, as well as the ignorant scholars of the world. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, he successfully used a vulgar dance to fool everyone's eyes and ears and became a great Confucian scholar. Moreover, he was called Mr. Cord. Enough. Fang Xianling couldn't stand it anymore and scolded, Kong Gong, this was decided by His Majesty, and His Majesty was also present that day. Are you saying that His Majesty, Prince Li of the first rank, and the 4 great scholars are all blind? Old man, I advise you to go home and recuperate if you're not feeling well. This Kong Yingda was usually fine. In fact, he had always been fine before. But why did he suddenly become violent? Impeach Zhang Feng? What was the meaning of this? And at such a crucial moment? Let him speak. Li Shimin was also intrigued by him. He was also worried about the identity of the mastermind, but he couldn't find any clues. However, this honest person from the Eastern Palace, a doctor from the Imperial College, was able to say something like this at this time. There must be something behind this. Fang Xianling sighed, but since the emperor said so, he could only sigh coldly and return to the queue. Kong Yingda couldn't care less. After all, Cui Fengjun from the Cui clan in Qinghe had been brooding over this matter. Moreover, Shandong had been extremely dissatisfied with Zhang Feng. During this period of time, he had been silently collecting evidence. Although there hadn't been any progress, he had inadvertently bumped into Niu Jinda and his son, who were strolling on the street yesterday. Moreover, they had entered Zhang Feng's villa. This had given him a breakthrough. After all, the incident of Niu Jinhu breaking his leg when he saw Niu Jinhu had become a well-known fact. But how long had it been? Had he recovered? As long as one wasn't an idiot, everyone would know that a person with a broken leg wouldn't recover so quickly. Even if he could keep his life, most of his leg would be gone. Even if he could hold it, it would take at least half a year for him to recover. But now? It had been less than a month and he could walk again? If this wasn't a lie, what was it? Combining everything that had happened before, he instantly understood. This was a scam. That was why there was such a scene. At this moment, seeing that Fang Xianling seemed to be anxious, Kong Yingda felt that these dukes, whom he had long suspected, were even more suspicious. Kong Yingda cupped his fists and said, Your Majesty, I'll impeach another person for this matter. Duke of Yuqijingda. Deceiving the emperor. At this moment, everyone was in an uproar. Even Li Shimin opened his eyes slightly. Seeing this, Kong Yingda stared coldly at the unperturbed Yu Qigong and the others and said, What happened to General Yuqijingda before? I think everyone here knows about it, right? Even ordinary people know that old Yu Qigong's son broke his leg. Presumably, everyone knows about the broken leg. But yesterday, an old official saw with his own eyes that the old thief actually took his son into Zhang Feng's mansion outside of Zhang Feng's mansion. Buzz! At this moment, everyone was in an uproar. Who didn't know that Niu Jinhu broke his leg when he saw Niu Jinhu? But now, some people didn't believe it and hurriedly asked, Duke Kong, is this true? Duke of Yi isn't such a person. You're talking nonsense. Bastard, how dare you slander our general? Kong Yingda was no longer in a hurry. Yu Qigong and the others were even less anxious. Instead, Yu Qigong grinned at Kong Yingda, as if he was looking at a fool. Chapter 1321. Li Shimin nodded and pretended to be surprised as he asked, "Beloved official Kong, is what you said true?" Kong Ingda hurriedly cupped his fists and said, "This old subject is willing to guarantee it with my head." Li Shimin coldly snorted and glanced at Yu Qigong. "Duke of Yi, do you know your crime?" Li Shimin was angry because he actually went to that brat's residence yesterday, and he didn't even know about it. However, he was also somewhat puzzled. He should have known that Fengzi was on the mountain. Why did he go to Fengzi's residence? Yu Qigong bowed and said, "Your Majesty, there are other secrets to this matter. Please allow this old subject to report to you later." Li Shimin coldly snorted again. "Beloved official Kong, who else do you want to impeach? Let's see how many of my helmsmen are slacking off for me." Kong Ingda had received the imperial edict and was now even more confident. He didn't notice Fang Xianling, who was constantly shaking his head and sighing. The next person this old subject wants to impeach is Fang Xianling. Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. Not even Master Fang was let off? At this moment, even Li Shimin couldn't stand it anymore. His face was terrifyingly cold. Everyone couldn't help but tremble when they saw this. Kong Ingda continued, "Also last night, all the dukes had a secret meeting in Fang Xuanling's residence. Moreover, Fang Xuanling's residence has been wantonly purchasing land during this period of time, even borrowing money to buy it. Not only that, all the dukes who participated last night also wantonly purchased land last night and this morning." The third person this subject wants to impeach is Imperial Physician Zhou of the Imperial Hospital. As we all know, this white thing can only appear in funerals, but since Imperial Dr. Zhou went to the Crown Prince's mansion a few days ago, his mouth has been covered with this thing. Even in such a big event like the autumn planting ceremony, he has to bring this thing with him. What is this? This is a disgrace to the heavens. Your Majesty, do you think this person's intentions are worthy of execution? Yes, Imperial Dr. Zhou is also the person who was rumored to have witnessed the exchange of blood and life. Has anyone here seen such a thing? Even the four great Confucian scholars and divine Dr. Sun are deceiving the people of the world at the same time. This old subject would like to ask, what crime do you all commit? As a general of the Tang dynasty, you, Nyo Jinda, don't think about the national affairs. Instead, you conspire with those people to deceive the whole world. What crime do you think you deserve? I heard that you went to Mount Longsho and were mysteriously poisoned. May I ask if the poisoning was fake and the crime was covered up? This time, even Wei Jing couldn't stand it anymore. He looked at Kong Ingda coldly and said, "Kong Ingda, have you caused enough trouble?" Kong Ingda was stunned. He looked at Wei Zheng in surprise and said, "What's wrong, Prime Minister Wei? Are you angry from shame?" Although you usually have an upright image, the old man saw it clearly last night. Wei Zheng sighed and said, "Kong Ingda, since you have seen it, don't you think of something? How can you make such a fuss here?" This matter. At this time, it had already caused an uproar in the court. Kong Ingda represented the power of Shandong, and what he said was too shocking. But who were Wei Zheng and the others? They were all the favorites of the current emperor. At this time, all the ministers shrank their necks and didn't dare to speak. Some of them even kept silent, only hoping that Kong Ingda wouldn't bring trouble to himself. At this time, Li Shimin just looked at them coldly. He also wanted to think about what Kong Ingda wanted to say. Basically, the people on Shao Mountain, as well as Cheng Yaojin and the others, had all been impeached by him. At this time, the two sides were already in an uproar. Even the hot-tempered Cheng Yaojin was about to raise his fist. Li Shimin snorted and said, "Have you caused enough trouble?" In an instant, everyone quieted down, but Li Shimin suddenly stood up and slowly walked down the 8-step stairway to heaven. He looked at the crowd and said, "What Kong Ingda just said, we basically know about it. But the cause of all this seems to revolve around White Deer College's Zhang Feng. I would like to ask all my beloved subjects, which of your manors has a child in White Deer Academy? Those who are, step forward." In an instant, after a short moment of hesitation, more than 30 to 40 people stood to the side one after another. Then, Li Shimin took out a piece of white paper from the table and asked, "We are asking, who is using this piece of white paper? Stand to the left of us." At this time, almost everyone in the court stood to the left of Li Shimin. Then Li Shimin said again, "Who is eating the braised meat, fine salt, beer, white wine, barbecue, and bone-strengthening powder from Chang'an Hotel?" At this time, the entire hall instantly became silent. Li Shimin stared coldly at Kong Yingda and said, "Kong Yingda, on our table, there is still the memorial you gave us yesterday. It seems that thing is also a piece of white paper?" At this time, Kong Yingda faintly felt that something was wrong. His face suddenly turned pale. Li Shimin clasped his hands behind his back and stared at Kong Yingda, saying, "Then we are asking you, are you still satisfied with the bone-strengthening powder? Are you still satisfied with the white wine, beer, barbecue, and braised meat? How much of the banknotes in your pocket and the fine salt in the kitchen do you still have? We can tell you that these things were all made by Zhang Feng and Lord Zhang's son on the mountain, and we have tacitly approved of these things. Are you going to impeach us next?" Yu Qigong couldn't help but shout, "How dare you, Kong Yingda? Do you know your crime?"